If there's anything that I've learned over the past year of reading scary internet horror, it's that a story doesn't need to be bloody to be scary. The most disturbing stories are the ones that make you question your reality, your memory, and whether the narrator can even be trusted. And that's exactly what I've brought to you today. It's a collection of some of my favorite psychological horror stories that I've ever read. In between each story, I'm going to be giving you my take on why I think it deserves a spot in this video. So yeah, let's go ahead and get right into it. The first story of today is from r/no sleep from user excellentmaze568. I was rescued after spending 3 months in a cave. I should have stayed there. Carl was dead. He passed in the night, too weak from the cold and hunger to keep fighting. I couldn't blame him. I was about ready to go myself. Cold permeated every molecule of my being. The memory of what warm felt like had long since vacated my mind. Forming thoughts had become as hard as moving my fingers, purple from the frostbite that ate away at them. The only thoughts I still had now were those of hunger. Staring at Carl's corpse, it looked less like my friend and more like another day on this earth. I lay face down on the stone floor, my head cocked towards what was left of Carl. His pale gray skin was flaked with ice crystals, his tongue hanging out of his mouth, purple and bloated. I licked my lips at the thought of biting into it, aching for the feeling of anything in my stomach, anything to fill the void in my abdomen that screamed for food. "Carl," I rasped, my throat igniting into a hellfire at the effort. I waited for an answer, my ears straining against the howl of the wind for sound, any proof of life. I closed my eyes against the hunger. "Ted, you still with me, buddy?" My eyes shot open. I stared at the corpse on the ground before me. His eyes were still glazed over, tongue still jutting from his mouth like a plum ripe for the picking. "Teddy, you did it. You lasted longer than me, old friend." His voice was as it had been when the blizzard hit. He still had the SoCal accent with that nasally note Snow always gave him. When was the last time I heard that voice? It had been a couple of days, or was it weeks? "Carl?" I croaked again, the strain almost too much to handle. "That's right, Ted. Your good buddy Carl in the flesh." I blinked. His lips weren't moving, but that was Carl's voice. "You won, Teddy. You remember our deal? Winner gets to eat the other person. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Right, dude?" As a matter of fact, I couldn't remember the deal. I couldn't remember much of anything since we crawled into the cave. My stomach had resorted to eating memories, anything to keep going. I attempted to respond, but my throat failed me, only managing a guttural moan. "That's the spirit. Looks like the Tedster's still kicking. Look, I don't want you to die too, buddy. No reason for both of us to go, right?" Carl had a point. He was always the smart one. He had booked the ski tickets at a steal, after all. And why should we both die? God couldn't be that cruel, right? Taking out two friends who went out for a little fun in the snow? No. "Now you're cooking, Teddy. Don't just let me go to waste. I wouldn't do that to you." My fingers tensed on their own, twisting into claws against the stone. My arms pulled. The sound of my jacket scraping the stone and ice filled my ears as I flinched towards Carl. My sense of touch long since killed by the cold. "That's it, Teddy. You're nearly there." My legs followed behind me limply as I drew nearer, closer to Carl, closer to food. The smell of death began to permeate the air. It was intoxicating, better than any Thanksgiving dinner. Every pull towards his corpse gave me renewed energy. Carl really was a good friend. My fingers hooked into Carl's jacket. With one last heave, I pulled myself on top of him, my face pressed into the icy surface of his cheek. "Way to go, Tedster. Hard part's over. Claim your prize." I licked my lips in anticipation, slowly forcing my jaw open, my frozen muscles popping and straining from underuse, lowering my teeth down until they touched the pale flesh of his emaciated jaw muscle. "Nice, Teddy. Just a little bite." My jaw closed slowly, like a hydraulic press. My teeth pressed into his skin, meeting resistance as the pressure started to grow. The flesh gave like biting into frozen ice cream. My eyes rolled back into my head from the pleasure of eating. I had taken eating for granted. It was no longer a task that had little meaning. I would treasure eating forever, all thanks to Carl. My jaw slowly closed around the hunk of flesh. I chewed once, twice, then swallowed. A low growl of pleasure escaped my lips as I felt the flesh slide down into my stomach. That's a boy, Teddy. Don't stop now. Food's getting cold. I started biting and chewing with new ferocity. It was a blur of motion the cave had not seen since the first day we entered. Primal hunger took over as I devoured Carl. As I ate the last gift he had ever given me. I ate Carl over the next few days, stripping his clothes and layering them on myself. I didn't shiver as much anymore. First was all of the flesh. Face, arms, legs, torso, even his butt. Then the soft organs. His heart was sweeter than anything I've ever eaten. It makes sense. Carl was a nice guy. By the time I had eaten his trachea, I could stand and walk freely around the cave. Look at you go, Teddy. Looking just like Schwarzenegger now. Carl's voice echoed through the cave. The last thing to eat was Carl's brain. I held the rock in my hand, the sharp edges digging into my palms. Waste not, want not, Tedster. I wasn't going to waste any of Carl. The rock echoed off his skull with a dull crunch. I brought it down again and again until I couldn't take it anymore and began tearing his skull apart with my bare hands. The rock left covered in blood on the cave floor. As I wiped my mouth and sat back, I looked out of the cave's mouth. The snow had stopped. How long ago had it ended? How long was I eating Carl? I walked out into the gray afternoon, the sun already starting to dip towards the horizon. Stumbling, I followed it. I walked all night. Night turned to day, then back to night. I walked, knowing if I stopped, I wouldn't get back up. The landscape around me was dead and infinite. All of the trees looked the same, their gnarled branches protruding like bony fingers down towards me. I walked until my legs gave out, face planting in the snow. My eyes got heavy as I lay there, my vision reduced to a pinhole as I drifted off to sleep. When I awoke, the first thing I noticed was the lack of cold. Warmth? A rhythmic beeping filled the air as I willed my eyes to show me where I was. No matter how hard I tried, how many times I blinked, I could only see white. I groaned, earning a shocked gasp off to my right. I spent the next 2 weeks in the hospital. I had been missing 3 months when the park rangers found me. Frostbite had destroyed my fingers, toes, and other patches of skin. My walk through the woods gave me snow blindness, which explained the gauze wrapped over my eyes when I awoke. Worst of all, I had lost almost 80 pounds, but thanks to Carl, I was alive. I was hooked to a feeding tube for those 2 weeks while I recovered. Doctors said I wouldn't be able to process solid food for a while after my stomach had gone so long without it, but I knew that was a lie. When they released me at the end of the 2 weeks, I was a new man. The cops asked me questions about what happened. Where had I gone? How did I survive? Where was Carl? I didn't answer, unable to remember anything but the taste of Carl's flesh. That was something I would never forget, and something these people wouldn't understand. Carl had given me a gift, and I wouldn't waste it locked in a cell. They let me go, and I boarded a plane back to California. The first thing I did when I got home was stop at my favorite burger joint. I sat in my car holding the biggest burger they had on the menu. Real food. I took a big bite and paused. It didn't have any flavor. I swallowed the hunk of meat, disappointed. Maybe my taste buds hadn't come back yet? I ate the burger slowly, sitting in silence. As I took the last bite, I threw my car door open and vomited all of it back up onto the pavement. Maybe the doctor was right. I wasn't ready for solid food yet. I returned to my apartment, getting lost a few times along the way. Sticking the key in the lock and giving it a turn, I saw her. She was more beautiful than I remembered. Ted? Her hand shot up, covering her mouth, as tears flowed over her cheeks. Hey, Jess, I said hoarsely, tears welling up in my eyes. She ran over, wrapping me in a hug tight enough to split a boulder. Her words came flowing out like music to my ears. I had made it home. Thanks, Carl. Life returned to some semblance of normalcy. I was fired from my job. Not that I had a desire to work right now anyway. Jess put me on a liquid diet following the doctor's orders. The shakes and broths had no flavor and left me hungry no matter how full my stomach felt. That was fine for the first week, but the longer I was home, the more frustrated I had become not being able to eat real food. The only difference in my life was the dreams. I had 2 recurring dreams that filled my mind at night. The first, my teeth sinking into Carl's flesh. Except in the dream, he was sitting up, his dead eyes staring into mine while his mouth contorted into a wide smile. His teeth just a little too sharp, his skin pulled a little too tight. "That's right, Teddy. Gotta get your strength back, buddy," he would coo as my teeth ripped and pulled skin and muscle off his bones. The second dream was something I couldn't remember seeing. I was walking through the woods completely nude. Snow and wind whipped past me, but I couldn't feel the cold. I could hear Carl's voice through the dead woods, beckoning me closer. "Here, Tedster, I'm just over here." I was trudging through the snow after him. His voice was different, the accent gone, replaced by a malice I've never heard any voice utter. The voice never got any closer, no matter how far I walked. I would call out for him, in the same voice I had in the cave, a hoarse croak that echoed off the trees. I awoke with a start one night. How long had I been home again? Time was losing its meaning. It's strange how meals help mark the passage of time. I reached over, placing a hand on Jess. Her soft, warm skin was a comfort. My stomach growled loudly as I traced the curvature of her arm. Maybe I could eat real food again. It couldn't hurt, could it? I padded softly to the kitchen, making myself a sandwich, sitting down at the kitchen table with only the fridge light illuminating me. I took a bite. Nothing. No taste to speak of. Swallowing, I devoured the sandwich, savoring the feeling of food going down my throat. "How's the sandwich, Teddy?" I froze, looking around the dark kitchen, searching for the source, searching for Carl. I stood up from the table. An intense nausea flooded my whole body. Running to the guest bathroom, I barely had time to raise the toilet seat before a spew of greasy black bile erupted from my mouth. Yeah, I was never much of a turkey guy myself. Carl's voice echoed inside the small room. I heaved until my stomach was empty again. The hunger gnawed at my stomach like a rabid dog. Flushing the toilet, I sat on the floor and cried, my back against the wall as I pulled my knees to my chest. "Aw, cheer up, Teddy. At least you got to have it for a little while." I looked around again. Alone in the dark, the cold linoleum pressed into my backside. "Carl, where are you?" I asked quietly. "Where do you think, buddy? I couldn't just let you leave me in the cave, you know." I stood up slowly, backing myself into the corner. "No, you're dead. I ate you. You let me live." His chuckle filled my ears. My skin went cold, goosebumps covering my arms. Did Carl chuckle? He always had that stupid laugh that would bring out a smile even on the worst days, but a chuckle? Unnerved, I went back to bed. That was the first time Carl talked to me, but not the last. The next few weeks were hell. I was starving. Jess left to go to a conference in LA for work, leaving me all alone. Surrounded by food I couldn't eat without throwing up, unless it went through a blender first. The gray sludge in the blender had no taste. It had no substance. No matter how much I drank, I never felt full. I sat crying in the kitchen floor with the fridge door left wide open. The shelves were bare as I had blended every morsel of food and consumed it. Egg, ham, lettuce, cheese, even raw hamburger meat jammed into the blender and blended to a puree. It didn't even scratch the hunger within me. "Whoa, eating for 2, buddy?" Carl's voice taunted from everywhere. "Please make it stop." I sobbed into the empty house. "Oh, I can't make it stop, Teddy. You made your choice. You have to live with it." His voice was different, sharper, cruel and cold despite his teasing words. I hardly noticed, the growl of my stomach louder than the concern in my head. I crawled over the floor towards the trash can, knocking it to the floor and spilling its contents. In a frenzy, I began devouring whatever scraps of food that were left in the bag. How the mighty have fallen, Ted. I didn't care what Carl had to say, shoveling scraps of whatever seemed edible into my mouth. It had no taste. The familiar feeling of nausea hit me. I ran to the bathroom, standing over the sink, as a black bile projected out of my mouth. I cried, panting as I fought for breath. Looking up in the mirror, I froze. I watched in horror as a piece of intestine quickly retracted from my open mouth back down my throat. I blinked. My mind must be breaking. The starvation making me see things. I stared into the mirror. My shirt moved just a fraction, like a wrinkle releasing from the fabric. I tore it over my head, staring at my stomach. Watching in horror, the intestine snaked its way around my bloated stomach. I couldn't let you leave me in that cave, Teddy. I was frozen. The only thought filling my head was the starvation that racked my body. My eyes fell on my reflection. The eyes in the mirror were not my own. Sunken into my skull, ringed with black bags from exhaustion, my hair had thinned, stringy patches where a full head of brown hair had once grown, the intestine coiling around my abdomen. You need to eat, Teddy. You know what you have to eat. The intestine continued to coil. I could feel it sliding around my stomach, stoking the flame of my hunger. I heard the key sliding into the lock of the front door. It's supper time, Ted. The words echoing within my very skull. It was no longer Carl's voice. I heard the door open, Jess calling out that she was home. How long had she been gone? My stomach growled audibly in response. Remember our deal, Teddy. I heard Jess gasp as she entered the kitchen, its disarray startling her. Ted, are you here? She called shakily. My fingers tensed on their own, contorting into claws. Food's getting cold, the voice whispered within my soul. I wish I could say I fought it, that I snapped out of it and got help. I wish I could say I did the right thing, but I didn't. I sit in the kitchen typing this out. By the time you find this post and the crushed bones of the woman I love, I'll be on a plane back to North Dakota. The hunger is gone for now, but it'll be back. I can feel it moving within my stomach now. I won't let it win. I'm going back to the cave, secluded from anyone else who I could hurt. Back to Carl. Back to where this thing came from. I'm sorry for the mess. What makes this one psychological isn't the cannibalism. It's the way the horror of it slowly takes over Ted's mind. Like, Ted's mind is being inhabited by his friend that he ate. So, R.I.P. Carl. The next story's from r/NoSleep from user Tiara NBC. I made a friend with the girl in the shed, and she shares the same freckle I have. I always hated going to my dad's mother's house. To make things easier, I'll call her Grandma for this, but I don't see her as such. To this day, I can't tell you who hated whom more. But there is a big difference. I was a kid and she was a grown woman. In front of my parents, she acted the role of the loving grandma. Her lies weave a story of a clumsy girl who loved to play at her house. And me, terrified of what would happen if I said otherwise, agreed with her wonderful tales of how I got new bruises and cuts. The one thing that kept me going was that my stays with her were only temporary. At most, I stayed a few hours with her, waiting for my parents to get out of work or come back from their date night. But during one of their date nights, they never came back. No one knows who did it, but someone cut the brakes. They never made it to the restaurant, and the only place they had been to before that was Grandma's house. In the end, it was considered a freak accident, even though everything said it was anything but. When my maternal grandma offered to take me in, I felt some relief in my ocean of grief. This relief was short-lived, as Grandma fought to keep me, and won by saying I would have more normalcy with her, and that unlike my maternal side, I had many cousins to grow up with, and aunts and uncles to spoil me. My maternal grandma had no other children besides my mother, and no extended family to offer. My opinion on the matter was irrelevant to the court, so I was never asked, and I ended up with my paternal grandma. You will pay for everything. She smiled as she looked down on me the first day I was there. I trembled at her words, knowing she would make me pay for whatever she thought I was at fault for. I won't talk about all the horrors this woman made me go through and how everyone turned a blind eye to it, except for the shed. Outside the house, in the perfectly kept garden, there was a small shed. It was full of equipment, not insulated, and according to her, that's where the monster lived. Anytime she got tired of me, she would lock me in there and say she hoped this time the monster would eat me. By the time I was living with her, I no longer believed in said monster. I had already realized that she was the real monster. Still, I was 8, had just lost my parents, and the last thing I wanted was to be alone in that shed. Any company would be better than the empty shed. So that night, when she dragged me there, I screamed my lungs out, begging her to let me sleep in the house, knowing the consequences I would face in the morning for screaming too loudly when people could hear me. "Please, Grandma, I want to be inside with you," I cried. Side note, guys, this is literally the worst grandma I could ever imagine. I'm loving how the author's portraying her, though. Let me know if you guys had a monster grandma. I hope you didn't, though. She didn't answer back. Instead, she gave me a smug look that quickly contorted to anger once more. She pushed me inside the shed and closed the door without a second glance. I wanted to cry, but the tears never came. Instead, I moved some shredders and made sure no spiders were in there. I thought of lying down and sleeping, but instead I got up angry, wanting to hit something, break things, just feel something other than sadness and fear. But as I was about to hit the wall, I heard something, or someone, and I froze. "Please don't hurt yourself." The voice of a girl came from the darkest part of the shed. "Please, it hurts a lot." Small pale hands with ruptured knuckles came out of the darkness. I tried to back away, but there wasn't anywhere to back away into. I couldn't take my eyes off those hands. Those tiny hands that match mine in size. So broken, full of unhealed gashes and bruises, and when I finally looked up, there she stood, looking at me in as much surprise as I felt. "You see me," she whispered. "I do, but who are you? What's your name?" I asked. The fear I had felt a few seconds ago had turned to curiosity. "I don't know." The girl's voice trembled as if she were about to cry. "I know. What if we choose a name for you?" I said excitedly. The girl looked at me and nodded. "I'm Leia, by the way," I said as I extended my hands towards her. She slowly took my hands, but the moment she touched me, my heart started to race. Dizziness led to nausea, and my vision blurred for a second. And then it was all back to normal. "Are you okay?" she asked, concerned. "Yeah, I don't know what happened," I responded as I sat down. "Be careful when you sit down, not to squish the spiders." When she looked at me, I noticed something both familiar and strange. She had an eye freckle, just like my dad and me. After my classmates made fun of me and said I had dirt in my eye, my mom explained that wasn't the case. She told me that my dad loved me so much that he had given me a piece of him to carry with me. "This is so cool. We both have the same eye freckle. Maybe we're sisters," I said excitedly. "That would be nice," she smiled. "Oh, a name, I forgot. What about Iria? I think it's really pretty." I looked at her hopefully. "I like it, thank you," she said as she went to hug me. The same feeling of dizziness, as if the world had gone wrong, came back the moment she touched me. I involuntarily shuddered, but hugged her anyway. I had decided at that moment that Iria was my sister and we would be the best of friends. "I'm glad to have a sister," she whispered. "I'm glad to have one too." I smiled, and for the first time, I didn't hate the shed. I had found something I had always wanted, and when morning came, I would tell her to come live with me. Grandma's house wasn't great, but together we could make it better. I'm not sure when I fell asleep. All I remember was talking with Iria about all the cool things we could do together. I told her we could go visit my maternal grandma, so she could experience having a nice grandma. Iria didn't know how old she was, so we decided I would be the older sister, and as such, I had to make sure she was happy and safe. "Get up, hurry," Aunt Manuela yelled at me. She lived next door with my 3 cousins and her always wandering husband. "The social workers will be here soon, so you better clean yourself up and behave. You know what happens if you don't," she threatened. I quickly got up and ran back to the house to shower and be ready to have my hair pulled into a perfect ponytail by her. Not obeying would mean no dinner, and probably no breakfast either. In my haste, I had forgotten about Iria. I showered extra quickly and put on the new clothes laid out for me and went outside to the shed. But when I opened it, she wasn't there. I thought maybe she had gone home or something and went back inside the house to get my hair pulled. The show went as usual. Grandma and Aunt Manuela doted on me and showed the social workers my room, painted in what they said was my favorite color, pink. I hated pink. Aunt Manuela would call my cousins over to come and play with me while the adults talked with the social worker. Once the visit was over, things went back to normal. I no longer had access to the room, and my cousins weren't allowed to play with me. During the day, I was never sent to the shed, but now I wanted to go back there and hopefully see Iria once more. That night, I wasn't sent to the shed. Grandma was too happy with the visit and continuous money she was getting from having to tolerate me. I didn't sleep much, wondering if my little sister was doing okay. "You're so ugly," Regina pushed me to the ground. "No, I'm not," I yelled back. I knew that if I touched her, I would get in so much trouble. "Yes, you are. My mom said so, because you look like your ugly mother," Regina mocked me. And I lost it. I didn't care if she made fun of me, but no one made fun of my mom. I got up from the floor and I punched her directly in her nose, just like my mom had taught me. Blood splattered everywhere and she gave a loud shriek. "What did you do to my precious girl?" Aunt Estrella yelled from the house entrance. Her whale-like body tried to move quickly, but her feet could only go so quickly. Before reaching her daughter, she slapped me hard. I looked at her terrified, but her focus was back on her wailing and blood-soaked daughter. I felt some relief until I felt Grandma's hand on my shoulder. When I looked up, she was smiling, and that was so much worse than anger. Again, I won't go much into detail as this isn't what the story is about, but I did end up with bruised hands after Aunt Estrella hit them repeatedly with a belt, with Grandma and Regina as witnesses. That night, I was dragged into the shed to think about what I had done wrong. I cried and cried, hating my life, but hating those people who had hurt me even more. I was so absorbed in my pain that I screamed when a gentle hand touched me. I immediately regretted it when I saw Iria jump back frightened. "I'm sorry." I moved towards Iria. "I didn't know you were here." "Sorry, I saw you crying." Iria moved to sit next to me. "Look, our hands match now." I wiped my tears, flinching at the pain, and smiled when I saw Iria smile. We sat there in silence for a while. I wanted to bring up an idea I had had for a while, but was scared to say out loud. But my idea of Iria coming to live inside the house wasn't going to work. What if they hurt her too? "Iria, let's run away," I said seriously, and when I saw her freeze up, I kept going. "It's okay, I can take care of you. I can steal some food, and if we get to my grandma, I'm sure—" "I can't leave the shed," Iria interrupted me. "I can come during the day and open the door." I stopped as she shook her head. "I can't leave. I've tried." Iria started to cry. "I've tried many times. I just can't. Sorry, if you want to go—" "No, I could never leave you." I hugged her. "I'll stay with you." Iria spoke, but I didn't understand a word she said. The world swirled around me. I felt lightheaded as everything started to become dark, and once more, everything was all right. I didn't want to worry Iria, so I didn't ask what she had said, and just nodded. "Besides, you don't have to worry about Estrella for much longer." Iria sat back down and started to draw on the floor with her finger. "What do you mean that I don't have to worry about Aunt Estrella?" I asked. "She's going to die soon," she said as she continued to draw on the floor. "How do you know?" I asked as I started to draw on the floor too. The darkness in which I had first seen Iria emerge seemed to be creeping closer to us. I tried to back away, but she was unbothered as it made contact with her finger. "I don't know," Iria answered. "I just know." I didn't ask anything else. Instead, I joined her once more to draw on the floor and smiled when I saw she had drawn us together. The rest of the night, we created a world of magic and happiness with our drawings. Having Iria in my life did make things better. No matter what happened, what kind of beatings I took, or how much hunger I faced, I knew I would see her too. From time to time, I managed to sneak in the chalk colors my cousins left outside. We would draw inside the shed and erase everything before morning. A week later, we got the news that Aunt Estrella had died from a heart attack. She had been out eating burgers with Regina when she suddenly hit the floor and never got back up. Regina went to live with her father, and I never had to see her again. Grandma locked herself in her room, only coming out to eat whatever was not rotten in the fridge. As long as I avoided her during her outings, I didn't have to worry about her beating me. Aunt Manuela came from time to time to check on her and yell at me to clean the house. Since I had no supervision, I would go to the shed at night and sneak in sandwiches for us both. I enjoyed my time with Iria and started to intentionally make Grandma angry so she would send me to the shed. I didn't care that she would hit me or yell at me anymore because it meant I got to spend time with Iria. One night, after Grandma shut the door to the house, I turned to show Iria the bracelets I had made us from stolen beads and thread when I saw her rocking herself in the dark corner, crying. I approached her, but this time she flinched away from me. I wanted to get closer, but the darkness scared me. It embraced Iria. I'm unsure if protecting her or trying to keep her as its own. But as Iria sobbed once more, I made my trembling legs move towards her. After all, I was the big sister, and I had to take care of her. As I hugged her, the usual dizziness took over, but this time it took a much stronger hold of my heart. I felt the air leave my lungs, and the darkness became heavy, too heavy for me to hold. "No!" Iria screamed. And finally, I was able to breathe. The air in my lungs had never felt so good. I hadn't noticed that I'd peed myself and felt embarrassed. I sat up, covering myself as best as possible and hoping Iria couldn't smell my soiled clothes. "I'm sorry," I managed to cough out. I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for, but felt like I had to. "I don't want you to die," she cried. The world became silent for a second. I couldn't hear Iria's cries, nor my own, as I processed what she had just said. I was going to die. I was going to die, just like my mom and dad did. I wasn't ready to die. "Iria, I won't die," I said as I wiped the tears off my eyes. "I have to take care of you." I had dropped the bracelets in my trance, but picked them up and handed one to Iria. I made sure to put the one heart-shaped bead on her bracelet. She took it, carefully, making sure not to touch me, and put it on. "I don't want to lose you," she cried. "I was alone for so long, and finally I have you. I have a sister to talk with and have fun. I don't want that to ever end." "Don't worry, as long as we're both wearing these bracelets, we'll always be together." I tried to smile. That night, we didn't do much. We took turns crying, but as much as I tried to approach her, she never let me get close. I never knew when I fell asleep, but this time when I woke up, I felt a pang of sadness at not seeing Iria. While I knew better than to be crying when Grandma or Aunt Manuela opened the shed, I couldn't help myself but sob. Grandma looked at me in disgust as she dragged me back inside the house. But right before making it in, she stopped as she felt something that shouldn't have been on my wrist. I felt my feet lift from the ground as she lifted me from my arm to look at the bracelet with the stolen beads. "You thief! How dare you take things of others? With all the things I give you and have sacrificed for you, you still dare to steal." She yelled at me as she threw me inside the house. I tried to respond, but I couldn't get a word out before she kicked me hard on my stomach. New tears ran down my face, but I ignored them as I tried to get away from her. "It's your fault my only son is gone, and you can't even be a good daughter to honor him. I gave you a home when no one wanted to, and this is how you pay? By being a thief?" She screamed as she went after me. I wasn't sure where to go, but I knew I had to get away from her. As she continued to yell at me, I ran. I could hear the clap of her sandals on the floor, a noise that to this day still haunts me as I try to get away from her. Then I felt something hard hit my head. I fell forward and saw blood running down my neck. Next to me was a heavy lamp that my dad had given her many years ago. I tried to get up, despite the world swimming around me, and I didn't want to die. She grabbed my leg and started to drag me into the kitchen. I screamed for someone to help, knowing the only one that would hear me was Aunt Manuela, and she would pretend everything was all right. "I hate you. I hate seeing you every single day. I hate the way you look, the way you speak, and how you even move. But you know what? You need to pay for everything, and I have enjoyed this so much. she said at me with a crazed face. As I saw her grab the mallet, I managed to free myself from her. Maybe it was out of instinct, but I ran towards the shed. I didn't want to die, and I didn't know what to do. As I opened the door of the shed, Grandma pulled at my hair, but instantly froze when she looked inside. "Iria, help me," I begged. Grandma let go of my hair, and I dropped to the floor. Her face contorted in terror. I didn't know what was going on, but Iria looked at Grandma with so much fury. "This can't be." Grandma's voice trembled. For the first time, Iria walked out of the shed, followed by the darkness that always embraced her. She walked directly to Grandma and looked her in the eyes. She then grabbed the mallet and dropped it to the floor. "It's time," Iria said calmly as she took hold of Grandma's hand. I could see her shudder the way I did whenever I touched Iria, but unlike me, she tried to let go. But no matter how much she tried, Iria wouldn't let her go. Instead, she was dragging her inside the shed and into the darkness. Grandma screamed to be let go. Aunt Manuela came out running from her house and froze at the sight of Iria and Grandma. Iria took one look at her, but went back to her task. "Iria, what's going on?" I asked, somehow feeling this would be the last time I saw her. Iria looked at me and smiled as she raised her hand with the bracelet. "I think I was supposed to be the big sister after all. I will always be with you," Iria said as she closed the door of the shed behind her. Aunt Manuela and I heard the screams of Grandma inside, but neither of us moved until everything was silent. But when Aunt Manuela opened the shed, there was no one. The darkness that always filled the shed was gone, alongside Iria and Grandma. There was no way to explain what happened, so when Aunt Manuela was asked about Grandma, she just said that one day she was gone, to who knows where. When she was offered custody, she refused, saying she never wanted to see me again. I went to live with my maternal grandma after the incident, and I could finally live life. I could be a child once more, and enjoyed being loved. Years later, I learned that Iria's real name had been Dolores, and she was my father's older sister. Grandma had hated her, and one day she went missing. Everyone assumed she was a rebellious child, but now I think I figured out what happened. I'm now a mother to a girl, born with the same freckle on her eye. I named her Iria, after the girl who was my friend, sister, and protector. I still wear the bracelet I made for us, and hope that she knows I still think of her. Now, as I look at my daughter, I understand what my mom has said about the freckle in our eyes. Because I couldn't love anyone else more in the world, and now she gets to carry that love and that of those who came before us. The horror in this one is not built on jump scares. It's that the little girl in this story lives in constant fear and tension in a toxic and abusive household. A lot of the time in these stories, the ghost that's in the shed is the antagonist, but in this one, it's a place where the main character, or OP, finds comfort. The next story today is also from r/NoSleep from user More Tanks. I think something on the subway is feeding on people like me. I first saw her on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was zoning out, half asleep on my usual subway commute. I always got on the same train, right at the front of the third car. For some reason, there were usually fewer people there. Everything about my mornings was the same. Coffee, some quick breakfast, then off to work. And as an insurance claims adjuster, my job wasn't exactly exciting. But that morning, the moment I saw her, I knew something felt different. Her skin was pale, almost glowing silver beneath her long, jet black hair. Her bright blue eyes were fixed on the darkness outside, staring into the empty tunnel as the train rushed forward. She was mesmerizing. There's no other word for it. As uncomfortable as it was, I couldn't look away, and somehow she noticed. Slowly, without moving her delicate face, she shifted her gaze, those piercing blue eyes landing directly on me. The moment our eyes met, I snapped my head away like a startled kid. Her eyes almost seemed to shine. Her pale face practically glowed, and I could swear there was the faintest hint of a smile at the corner of her lips. I turned my head in the opposite direction, trying way too obviously to look anywhere else, but she didn't stop looking at me. If anything, it felt like she turned even more toward me. I felt embarrassed and strangely proud at the same time. A woman like her, looking at me that openly, noticing me in a crowd like this, it was intoxicating. I almost forgot where I was, just basking in the warmth of that ocean blue gaze. When I glanced back at her, she smiled, but then shyly looked away, pretending she hadn't been staring at me at all. Her pale face was framed by red lipstick, her dark hair falling over her shoulders. I don't think I've ever studied someone the way I studied her. Who was she? Where was she going? The train began to slow, and I snapped out of it. This was my stop. But as I stood up, I saw her rise from her seat too, letting someone pass before stepping off the train. I felt a sudden rush of urgency. I needed to see her again, just once more. That narrow, perfect face, those deep, living blue eyes. I pushed my way through the doors and into the crowd, searching for that black hair. It felt like the world slowed down for a split second. She was already on the escalator, moving upward. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with her small, delicate hand, and just for a brief moment, just one, she looked back at me. I swear to God, out of all those rushing, gray, everyday people, she saw me again. Then she disappeared into the crowd above. I know this sounds stupid, but the rest of my day felt off after that. It was just a moment, barely anything, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. My mind kept drifting back to her. That radiant look in her eyes, her features, the way she vanished. I felt this strange kind of sadness, like I was already afraid I'd never see her again. But why did it matter? Why couldn't I let it go? The rest of the day dragged by like always. Papers, reports, claim forms, just routine. Then I went home. Part of me hoped I'd see her again on the way back, but she wasn't there. Everything felt duller on the way home. The same people, the same empty faces I saw every day. It was like something was missing from all of them. Something bright. Something blue. The rest of my evening went the same as always. Video games, TV, something to eat, then bed. It's a boring life, no question about that, but something was different. Something was there in the back of my mind, making me look forward to the next morning. And I didn't even understand why. I left late that morning. I was rushing, thinking I'd miss my usual train. I was practically running down the stairs to the platform. Or maybe I wasn't really rushing because of the train. I barely made it onto the platform when, through the crowd, I caught a glimpse of those familiar blue eyes. For a second, it felt relieving. But what was she doing down here? I'd never seen her at this station before. How was she here now? Had I just never noticed? The train pulled in, and she stepped inside with the flow of people. I froze for a second, just staring, then snapped out of it and pushed my way in after her. There were way more people than usual. I couldn't even get to my usual spot. But the moment I saw her, standing by the next set of doors, I suddenly realized what had been bothering me about the crowd. And weirdly, I felt better. Because just like me, she looked at me too. Our eyes met for a second. Her ocean blue gaze felt like it was searching for mine. The air around me felt warmer, and for a moment, I wasn't even on that crowded train anymore. It felt like we were somewhere else. Somewhere that belonged only to the two of us. It lasted maybe a second, but it stuck with me. That look, that faint smile, that soft, almost unreal face, it was enough for that entire morning. I don't even know why, but I smiled at her. She seemed to get a little shy, glancing away. Shit. What if she wasn't even smiling at me? The thought hit me instantly. Great, I'm making a fool of myself on the subway. What kind of world would this be where someone like her would be into me? Or even single at all? Side note, guys, the author portrayed the overthinking of men very well. I could feel sweat forming on my back, like this was somehow life or death important, whether some random girl on the train had a boyfriend or not. I looked away, feeling stupid. What was I even thinking? That I'd find love on a subway train? But as I stared blankly ahead, I caught something in the reflection of the dark window. She was looking at me, again. I turned back, and for a few seconds, we held eye contact. It was simple, but it felt incredible. This woman, she actually sees me. The train jerked to a stop. People grabbed onto whatever they could. Then the door slid open with a loud click. A wave of commuters poured out of the car. This wasn't my stop, so I stepped aside, letting everyone off. Once things settled down, I quickly moved into my usual spot, but she was gone. I craned my neck, shifting around in my seat, almost falling out of it trying to find her, but she wasn't there. The door slammed shut. I felt that sinking realization. She wasn't on the train anymore. But then I looked out onto the platform, and I saw that black hair. She was standing there, scanning the crowd like a startled deer. Looking for someone? Probably waiting for her boyfriend. Why else would she get off at a different stop than yesterday? Then she saw me. Her expression changed, something like sadness, maybe disappointment, maybe something else. For a second, it looked like she raised her hand. Or maybe I just imagined it. The train started moving and disappeared into the darkness of the tunnel. My mind was somewhere else again. I could barely remember what I did all day. I went through the usual routine, but it felt like I wasn't really there. Like part of me was still on that train, waiting for that beautiful, black-haired woman to look at me again, to smile, to shyly glance away. The next thing I knew, I was already home. The whole day slipped away in daydreams, imagining possibilities that probably had no chance of ever happening, or hoping, wishing, that I'd get some kind of sign that she was actually interested in me. And then, just as quickly, I'd sink into this quiet dread, convincing myself it was all in my head. That tomorrow I'd probably see her with some other guy. I couldn't fall asleep. I tossed and turned, restless, wide awake. And when I finally drifted off, I almost immediately found myself somewhere strange, but familiar. I was on the train. The same gray, ordinary subway car I always rode, but it was empty. Completely empty. I was all alone, or at least I thought I was, because when I looked beside me, she was there. Smaller than I remembered, pale, almost unnaturally so, and I knew instantly it was her. She turned to me, those large blue eyes locking onto mine. "Come," she whispered, leaning closer to me. "Come home with me." I could feel the warmth of her body, the soft, sweet scent of her perfume wrapping around me, the way her jet black hair brushed lightly against my skin. My body trembled, my heart pounded. It didn't feel like a dream. It felt real. She adjusted the shoulder of her dark red dress, then slowly rested her head against me. My alarm dragged me out of it. I shot up in bed, gasping for air. My whole body was drenched in sweat, and every part of me wanted to go back to that dream. But was it even a dream? My morning routine blurred together. My thoughts felt foggy, distant. There was no room in my mind for anything else, only her. I was pacing nervously on the subway platform. The crowd kept growing, more and more people piling in. But she was nowhere to be seen. After that dream the night before, I needed to see her. There was no way she just wouldn't be here. That would have completely broken me. Like some kind of lunatic, I kept snagging my head around, scanning the crowd, thinking maybe I'd just missed her. Maybe she was standing somewhere else. But she wasn't there. I let 2 trains go by, telling myself maybe she was just late. Maybe she took a different route today. But she didn't come. By then, I was already running late for work, and my mood had gone to shit. Even this tiny bit of happiness had been taken from me. The one small light in this miserable life. On the train, I just stared blankly ahead like a zombie. Nothing really mattered. I just wanted to see her. Just for a second. That black hair, those deep, hypnotic blue eyes. I needed to see her. When I got off, I drifted with the crowd, my face completely drained. I wasn't even looking at people anymore. Just legs, shoes, the same pants, the same suits. Everyone moving forward like it was the only thing that mattered in their lives. Then, suddenly, something hit me. A scent. Something I'd never smelled before. Soft, sweet, almost addictive. a perfume that seemed to crawl into your head and start pulling at your thoughts. But the crowd kept pushing me forward. There was no time to stop, no way to figure out where it was coming from. Everyone was rushing, trapped in the same endless loop. I lifted my head, hope flooding back into me, searching for the source of that scent. The scent I'd only ever dreamed about. And then I saw her, like a painting. I was already near the escalator when some overweight, sweaty guy tried to shove past me, telling me to hurry up. But that moment, that single moment, is burned into my mind forever. She was standing there. The crowd moved around her, flowing past like there was some invisible barrier keeping them away. No one bumped into her. No one pushed her aside. But who would dare? She looked excited, like she'd been waiting there for a long time, like she was searching for someone she met every morning. Was she waiting for me? Maybe she took an earlier train and I was the idiot thinking she was late. She wore a light brown coat, perfectly outlining her slim figure. Her blue eyes practically glowed among all the dull, gray people around her. Then she saw me. Her gaze locked onto mine as I moved up the escalator. I could see it, the relief in her eyes, the tension in her face melting away. She'd been waiting for me. When I reached the top, there was no question in my mind. I had to wait for her. No matter what, I had to talk to her. I needed to hear her voice. I needed more. I needed to know who she was. So I waited and waited. Long minutes passed, but she never came up. I started biting my nails, pacing, stepping a little farther from the entrance, but still watching every person coming up. But she wasn't there. The sound of my phone ringing snapped me out of it. "Zach, where the hell are you?" My boss's voice cut in, irritated. "You were supposed to be here 30 minutes ago. We have a meeting this morning." Oh, I didn't even know what to say. Honestly, I didn't care. I was still half watching the subway entrance. "I'm on my way, Derek. Just ran into something this morning. I'm coming. I'll be there." I stayed a few seconds longer, waiting for my blue-eyed muse to appear. But no one came. Just the same dull, forgettable people. Finally, I turned away, completely disconnected from reality, and headed to work. I was almost an hour late, but no one would understand. For the first time, I had something to hold on to. I just sat there, staring at my monitor. I barely got any actual work done all day. My mind was stuck on one thing, the woman from the subway. I could see her in front of me, those red lips, those deep, ocean blue eyes, her long, straight black hair. When lunch break came, I told myself I'd go grab something to eat. I ended up at the subway instead. I just stood there waiting, hoping she'd show up. Maybe she'd pass through. Maybe she'd be heading somewhere nearby. Maybe, by some random chance, she'd be there. But she wasn't. I spent almost an hour down there, and honestly, I don't even know what I was expecting. I didn't get food, I just stood on the platform and waited. I went back to work with my stomach growling, but I didn't care. What bothered me more was that I could only ever see her in that one short moment in the morning. Just a glimpse. That's all I ever got. By the time I finally finished work, I was completely drained. Tense, on edge, craving just one more look at her. I stayed near the subway station until it got dark, sitting on a nearby bench, watching, hoping I'd catch her on her way home. That I'd finally get to talk to her, but she never showed up. Doesn't she go this way? Did she leave earlier? Why wasn't she here? Was she with someone else? By the time I got home, my head was pounding with questions. I just wanted to see her again. At that point, I would have settled for just standing near her on the train. The moment I walked into my apartment, I collapsed on the couch. I was exhausted, but I couldn't rest. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't sleep. I didn't want to eat. All I could think about was her, that woman, that beauty on the subway. By the morning, I was dizzy. The world felt blurred around me. My steps were heavy, unsteady, but somehow I pulled myself together and headed out again. Not because of work, because it was morning, and I could see her again. I could see her. There were way fewer people than usual for that time of day, but I pushed forward anyway, half stumbling down toward the familiar subway entrance. I was barely holding myself together, squinting, searching for that one thing that still mattered. But she wasn't there. Again, and the train didn't come. Minutes passed, nothing. I glanced up at the display. 8 minutes until the next train. Why? It usually runs every 2 or 3 minutes. What the hell is going on today? I pulled my phone out of my pocket. The battery was almost dead. Saturday. I didn't even have work today. When did it become Saturday? How many days have I been searching for this woman? I don't even know what I was doing anymore. I wandered around the neighborhood, sometimes going home, sometimes just hanging around the subway station. There were times I stood out there for hours, just waiting. My entire weekend was spent focused on one thing, seeing her again. Maybe she'd be around the corner. Maybe I'd run into her on the subway stairs, but she was nowhere. I searched for her obsessively, like I was losing my mind. People started avoiding me, giving me weird looks. They probably thought I was some kind of crazy homeless guy living on the streets. I don't even know how many days I went without properly eating or drinking. Sometimes, when it crossed my mind or when the hunger got too strong, I'd go home. But even that felt unbearable, because all I could do was think about this. While I'm here, she might be out there, going to the subway, going to the store, just walking somewhere. So every time I got home, I'd almost immediately rush back out into the street. I had no idea what day it was anymore. No idea how long I'd been drifting around, searching for that black-haired woman. Then it was morning again. The crowd moved through the streets like it always did. My clothes were filthy, wet, stained, covered in grime. It looked like I'd been like this for far longer than just a weekend. Some broken part of my mind just decided, like this was normal, that I should go to work. So I grabbed my half-empty briefcase and joined the crowd. I stood there with them, waiting for the train. People moved away from me. Some gave me looks, rolled their eyes, but to me it felt just like another normal morning. Until the train arrived. She was on it. Like a beam of light cutting through my dull gray world, her black hair seemed to glow inside the subway car, standing out among all the lifeless faces. Her red lips shimmered, her blue eyes danced, and the moment she saw me, they locked onto me. It felt like I didn't even need to think anymore, like my body was moving on its own, guided by something else. I don't remember who I pushed past, who I shoved out of the way, but suddenly, I was standing right in front of her. The crowded subway car pressed us together, bodies packed tight. I could smell her, that same sweet, almost intoxicating perfume. She didn't look at me directly, acting like she was focused somewhere else. My brain wasn't working. Not a single decent line came to mind. Hey, I leaned closer awkwardly. I mean, we ride the same train a lot. I've seen you around. You work somewhere near here or something? She didn't respond right away. Didn't make a face, didn't turn away. It was like she was just watching me with those beautiful eyes. I mean, I tried to recover. I've seen you around here before. Where do you work? I don't work around here, she said suddenly. Her voice was soft, light, almost musical. I couldn't have imagined anything more perfect. Oh, right, I said, caught off guard. Then why do you come this way in the mornings? I have business here, she replied, smiling faintly as she looked away. It felt like a dream, a perfect living dream. Yeah, I smiled too. Guess I do too, if you think about it. We both laughed quietly. I'm getting off here, she said as the train began to slow. Me too, I answered instantly, without thinking. I was heading this way anyway. She smiled to herself, then brushed her hair behind her ear. Her neck, pale, smooth, almost seemed to glow. She was perfect. When the train came to a full stop, the crowd shifted, and we moved with it. As we stepped off, she stumbled slightly in her heels. I caught her. You okay? I asked, trying to sound calm. Yeah, she said. These stupid shoes, but thank you for catching me. I smiled at her, my chest practically bursting. Walking there with her, arm in arm, I could feel people staring. The jealousy, the judgment, men checking her out, women looking at her with envy. We moved through the station together, like some kind of royal couple, and I don't think I've ever been happier in my life. "Where are you heading next?" she asked as we reached the top of the escalator. That's when it hit me. I wasn't even at my usual stop. I had no idea where I was. But it didn't matter. I'd already won. "I guess wherever you're going," I said with a smile, trying to sound casual. "I've got time. I can walk you for a bit." "Oh, what a gentleman," she laughed softly, running her gloved hand along my arm. "Come on, then." We walked a few blocks. The morning crowd thinned out, the streets growing quieter. I walked beside her, proud, completely lost in that warm haze. I didn't even notice when we turned into an alley. Between trash bags and rotting piles of garbage, she suddenly stopped, slipping her arm out of mine. I turned back, confused. She just stood there. Her face had gone serious, and her blue eyes, they seemed brighter now. Not warm, something else, something sick. They moved like waves, like ocean pulling you under. "My dear," she said, but her lips didn't move. "Give yourself to me." I heard the words clear as day, but she hadn't spoken them. Or maybe she had, just not with her mouth. It was inside my head, soft, melodic, pulling me in. What do you want?" I asked, my voice shaking. She didn't answer. She stepped closer, right in front of me. Her hand pressed against my chest, too light, too cold. Those shifting eyes studied my face. Then the smell hit me. That sweet, intoxicating scent, but here, surrounded by garbage. It felt wrong, rotting, worse than the stench around us. And then I was on the ground. Just like that. The world spun, but somehow it felt like I was spinning the other way. The woman I had thought was so beautiful stood over me. She pulled off her glove. Her fingers were long, black as her hair, as her eyes. I couldn't move. I lay there on a wet trash bag, everything feeling like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The haze was gone, completely gone. She still looked young, beautiful, but there was something else now. Something not human. Her pale skin shimmered faintly, her blue eyes flickered, unnatural, and I knew. This thing had been playing with me. She raised one of those long black fingers, then slowly grabbed my face, squeezing my mouth open. With her other hand, she forced a finger down my throat. A sharp, tearing pain ripped through me. I felt it, felt that black, claw-like nail scraping down my throat, tearing into something I didn't even know I had. And then something worse, much worse. It felt like something inside me was being pulled out. From somewhere deep, somewhere no one should ever reach. It lasted maybe a second, and she yanked her finger back out. Tears streamed down my face. My lips trembled as her finger slid free with a sickening sound. And then I saw it, a small, glowing blue droplet slipping out of my mouth. Before it could fall, she caught it. She looked at it for a moment, then swallowed it. "I'm sorry," she said, almost playfully, "but this is what keeps me alive, my dear knight." My body still wouldn't move, my muscles locked, frozen. Tears kept falling, but inside, there was nothing, just emptiness. She calmly put her glove back on, adjusted her clothes, and when she was done, she leaned down and pressed a slow kiss against my lips. Then she stood up and just walked away, like she had never been there, leaving me behind. Empty, alone. Everything was blurry. I don't know when my body finally came back to me, or where that thing, disguised as a woman, had gone. I didn't even know who I was anymore. I didn't feel any longing for her. I didn't feel the need to go back to the subway. I was just empty, like a hollow shell stumbling forward. My body felt exhausted, like I hadn't slept in weeks. I hadn't even noticed before, but I wasn't wearing any shoes. I'd lost weight, way more than I should have. My hair was matted, sticking out in every direction. But the worst part wasn't how I looked. It was how I felt, or didn't feel. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was like I had lost the ability to feel anything at all. Like that part of me, the part that reacts to the world, that feels something, has been taken. I somehow made it back home. My apartment was a mess. It looked like I hadn't done anything but come home and trash the place for weeks. I collapsed into bed and passed out instantly. When I woke up, I cleaned everything. Myself, the apartment. As it turned out, I'd been fired 3 weeks ago. I got another job, slowly pulled my life back together. But the one thing I couldn't fix was what was inside me. I was like a machine. No purpose. Nothing entertained me. Nothing made me angry. I couldn't feel joy, not even the simplest kind. Days would pass like that. It felt like a mental breakdown, except for one small detail, something I couldn't explain. One day, I was heading home from work. As I got down to the subway, the train I was about to catch was already closing its doors. And there she was, standing inside. That same woman, long black hair, ocean blue eyes. She didn't recognize me, or maybe she just didn't care. She was watching someone else, a heavy-set guy. The way he looked at her, that same desperate hunger. The air around me felt like it froze, but I didn't feel anything. Not a single thing. Not even now. I absolutely loved this story, and it definitely deserves a spot in this video. The creature lady thing never relies on violence, really. It manipulates desire. It slowly isolates the OP from his job, his routine, his basic health needs, until she's the only thing he can think about. By the time that she confronts him, there's no point. He's already lost himself. The next story is from r/no sleep from user nocardiologist1353. My son has been staring at something behind me since the day he was born. June 18th was both the best and the worst day of my life. Due to health concerns, my wife had been scheduled for a C-section. My heart filled with joy as the nurses gently handed me my newborn son as I sat in the recovery room. My eyes filled with tears as I stared into the tiny face of my now sleeping infant. I'd do anything for this child. Slowly, I tore my eyes away from him to look up to the nurse. "When can we see his mom?" I asked. Her eyes widened slightly. "They're finishing up as we speak. Don't worry, someone will come and get you when she's ready to see you." After walking me through using a bottle and explaining the call button, she left with a cheery, "Don't be afraid to call one of us if you need help." There I was, alone with my son. So many thoughts filled my mind. How I wished I had been a better man. How I longed to be a better father than mine, who abandoned me at 12. As I stared into the angel-like face of my son, I felt scared, proud, and motivated to be the best dad I could be. As the hours passed, my joy slowly became replaced with a new feeling: worry. Where was Jessica? What was taking so long? Was this normal? Later that evening, a solemn doctor entered the room. "It's Grant, isn't it?" he said. "Yes, sir, that's right. Where's my wife? What's going on?" I said as I rose to my feet. He swallowed hard before saying, "I'm sorry, Grant. There was a serious complication, a heavy bleed, and well, I'm sorry, but your wife has passed away." I couldn't breathe. It felt like all the air had been forced out of my lungs. I fell back into my chair as a muffled scream finally exited my mouth. The tears soon followed, and almost as if he could sense my pain, my son joined in. A moment I will never forget. Through my own tears, I reached out to comfort my crying son. I cradled him in my arms, whispering to him that everything was going to be okay. All the while, my tears gently ran down my cheeks and dropped softly on his little head. Soon he calmed down, and as he did, I held him out to look him in the face, and for the first time, his little eyes opened to see the world around him. He had his mother's eyes. I smiled, choking back more tears. "Hello, David." Jessica loved that name. It was her top choice. "I love you, son, and Mommy loves you too." I gazed into my son's perfect face. In a way, it was like staring at his mother. For a moment, hope and resolve filled my mind. My Jessica had given me a real gift. I loved David more fiercely than I'd ever loved anyone. I promised myself, there and then, to give David the world. I noticed then something that didn't bother me at the time. David's beautiful little eyes didn't look back into mine. Instead, they stared off into the empty space just above my left shoulder. That was 5 years ago. It hasn't been easy being a single dad. Several years ago, I got the courage to ask my boss if I could do the majority of my work from home. Really, all that's required to work in accounting nowadays is a laptop and a good Wi-Fi connection. My boss was gracious enough to agree when he heard of my situation. Years as a corporate accountant have allowed me to afford a small home in the suburbs that is more than enough room for the two of us. David has grown into a healthy and happy little boy. Next month, he'll be 5. His light blonde hair and deep blue eyes remind me so much of his mother. His smile and laughter light up any room, and my life is altogether better because of my boy. Yet, something strange has been happening lately. I suppose that's why I'm writing this. Maybe someone out there will know what's happening or what I should do. Ever since his first day of life, I've noticed David staring at something behind me. When he was an infant, they told me don't worry about it. It takes time for baby's eyes to focus and identify faces from random objects. In no time, I should notice him doing it less and less. When the doctor said this, I was relieved, but the only thing is, that's not what happened. He never stopped. As a 1-year-old, he would look vaguely in my direction, but as I got closer, it was clear he was looking behind me, not at me. He would adjust when I talked to him. I'd say, "Hi, David." His eyes would shift from looking over my shoulder to looking into my eyes. "Hi, Dada," he would say with a smile. But as I lost his attention, his gaze would move behind me. He would just stare at nothing. Every now and again, he would smile at nothing, shake his head yes and yell. Or shake his head no and yell, "No, no." This concerned me. As a first-time parent, I had no idea what was normal toddler behavior and what wasn't. I remember that at one point, out of pure uncertainty, I called my deadbeat mom. All her life, my mom was unable to turn away from the same vices that ruled her when I was a child. Though she was now nearly 60, she was not very different from the alcoholic, drug-addicted 25-year-old I remember from my childhood. "What do you want?" Her loud, raspy smoker's voice startled me. "Mom, it's me," I said back into my phone. "Oh, Grant, it's you. What do you want?" came the reply. "I just wanted to ask you, is it normal for toddlers to stare off at nothing?" After a moment, she said, "How should I know? What do you think I am? Some sort of child psychologist?" I'm gonna pause here, guys. Someone needs to give this lady a medal. Sounds like she was a great mother to our OP here. I don't know about you guys, but I can picture this lady just like reeking of cigarettes with her cigarette in her hand. Anyways, let's continue. I'm sure whatever is eating at you is fine. Kids are kids. Who knows why the hell they do what they do? Look, Grant, I really have to go. With that, she hung up the phone. Putting down the phone, I muttered to myself, "Thanks a lot, Mom." Over David's toddler years, the doctors didn't seem to be concerned either. I often heard, "Oh, that's not really a concern. He's probably just a little shy. Some kids take longer developing socially, not a big deal." Shortly after David's 4th birthday, I finally convinced myself that it wasn't a big deal. David was such a sweet and caring little boy. He wasn't antisocial, though it was difficult finding friends his age. Overall, he was very smart for his age, so then why was I concerned? I needed to accept him for who he was and not try to change him. I decided then not to be bothered by it anymore. The following months were good. Work was going smoothly, I was finally starting to make some friends in the neighborhood, and David would be starting kindergarten in the fall. Life was finally feeling normal. Up until last month, when suddenly, in the middle of the night, I heard quiet whispering coming from David's room. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I slowly walked the short hallway from my room to David's. I cracked the door open as quietly as I could. Just in case I had misheard, I didn't want to wake him. His dark room was gently lit by a little night lamp, which cast strange shadows on the walls. My body tensed up slightly as I saw David. He sat on the floor, back to me and the door, as he stared into an empty corner of the room. He wasn't staring straight ahead into the corner. Rather, his head was looking slightly up as he stared off somewhere near the ceiling. He was whispering. I heard him say things like, "I'm glad you're here. Can I come with you? Do you want to play?" I was creeped out. I felt certain he must be sleepwalking, although that is creepy nonetheless. I quietly opened the door farther before saying, "David, what are you doing? It's past bedtime. We can play tomorrow." He went quiet and didn't move. A moment later, he whispered, "He says it's bedtime. I have to go," before standing up and silently returning to his bed. He fell asleep instantly. I didn't sleep well that night. The next day was a Saturday. I still felt pretty unnerved about last night, so as we sat at the breakfast table and I watched David eat his bowl of Fruit Loops, I asked, "Hey buddy, do you remember when Dad came into your room last night?" David didn't even look up from his cereal. He just said, "Yeah." "Who were you talking to last night?" "My friend." I was puzzled. "Your friend? Does he have a name?" He nodded. "His name is Billy." I frowned. "Is Billy always in your room?" He shook his head. "No." "Do you know where Billy is?" He looked up, but not at me, past me. "Yeah, he's behind you." At that moment, I felt on the back of my neck the slightest movement of air, almost like someone directly behind you breathing on your neck. I don't know why, but I didn't want to turn around, but I forced myself to turn my head and look behind me. Of course, there was nothing there, just our empty kitchen. That evening, we had been invited to a cookout with the new family that moved in across the street. They had a young boy named Clay, who was a little over a year older than David, and the two would become fast friends. Shortly after lunch, David asked to go over to Clay's to play before the cookout. I had to catch up on some work projects, so I told him to go ahead and to have fun. After watching to be sure that he had crossed the street safely, I retreated to my office, put my earbuds in, and got to work. After about an hour in, I felt a light tap on my shoulder. Thinking David had come back home and needed something, I took out my earbuds and spun around in my chair ready to greet him. But David wasn't there. In fact, no one was. I was alone. Confused, I walked around the house calling for David. As I passed by the front window, I peeked out and saw David and Clay playing joyfully on the lawn across the street. Swallowing hard, I turned to face my empty house. Tried my best to convince myself that I was just tired and must have imagined it. That night was great. The cookout was just what David and I needed. The time with other parents made me feel like I wasn't the only one struggling with raising my son. I stood next to Clay's dad, Brad, as he manned the grill. We talked about our work, sports, and our hobbies. Brad was easy to get along with. He was charismatic and easygoing. I anticipated we would become fast friends. "Hey Brad, question for you," I said as he started pulling the hot dogs off the grill. "Shoot," he replied. "Did Clay ever have an imaginary friend?" He chuckled. "Why? Does David have an invisible buddy?" "Yeah, and it's really weirding me out. Maybe it's just because it's just the two of us, but I don't know. Kinda creeping me out." "Well, to answer your question, yeah, Clay had one of those for a while. Called it Mr. Buttons. I got a buddy who's a counselor, and he said it's pretty normal and can actually help their imagination develop, so I wouldn't worry too much about it." I nodded. "Thanks, man, that helps. I'm sure my wife would have known what to do, and I don't know. Sometimes I don't feel like I know what I'm doing." He put his hand on my shoulder. "We all feel that way from time to time, but you can always come to us for help. After all, it takes a village." He handed me a plate with a hot dog on it. "Thanks, man, for everything." 9 p.m. rolled around and everyone started heading home. David held my hand as we crossed the street back to our house. In the middle of the street, he looked up at me and said, "Dad, could my friend do a sleepover tonight?" "Well, I guess we could go ask Clay's parents, but it's kinda late." He giggled. "No, not Clay. Billy." "Billy?" "Yeah, Billy wants to spend the night. Can he, please?" I hesitated, but then remembered Brad's words. "Yeah, I think that would be fine." Then jokingly added, "But maybe we should ask Billy's parents first." David laughed. "Billy doesn't have parents. He's very old." Somehow, that didn't make me feel any better. The rest of the summer was mundane. As much as I didn't like it, I got used to my son talking more and more about his imaginary friend. A month before David started kindergarten, I found him sitting alone in the corner of his room. He was quietly crying. His knees were brought up close to his chest, and his forehead rested upon them. "David, what's wrong?" He looked up when I spoke, snuffled, and wiped his nose with his hand. "Nothing," he weakly said. I walked in and sat on the floor next to him, gently wrapping my arm around him. "What's going on, big guy?" I asked softly. He didn't say anything for a while, just sat there sobbing quietly. After a few moments, I heard a low whisper. "Dad?" "Yes, David," I whispered back. "Where's Mommy?" A lump formed in my throat. This is the type of conversation the parenting books don't prepare you for. "Well, son, Mommy got really sick and well..." Tears formed in my eyes. I had no idea how to have this talk. "Well, she died, son." David's wet eyes looked at me, not sure what I meant. "Billy says she didn't want me, so she left." I could feel a wave of anger coming over me. Jessica had given her life to have David. Of course she wanted him. But I remembered, this was David trying to understand why everyone else had a mom and why he didn't. He was struggling with death and using Billy as a guise to voice feelings I'm sure he felt. "No, not at all, son. She loved you very much. She just got really sick and had to leave. It's not because of you at all. She wanted you so much." He looked at me. "Is she ever coming back?" Holding back tears, I slowly shook my head and whispered no. I'm afraid not. "Billy says he saw her leave." I pulled my son in close for a tight hug as tears ran down my face. "It's not true, David. Billy wasn't there. Mommy loved you very much, and so do I." He hugged me back. "I love you too, Dad." The last few weeks of summer, a change took place in my son. David had always been a shy kid, but he had become downright quiet. He spent less and less time with Clay and the other kids of the neighborhood, and more time wandering the halls and rooms of our home, despite my best efforts to get him to go play with his friends. As I drove him to kindergarten for the first time, it dawned on me that David had become a completely different child. He rarely looked at me or anyone else in the eye. He simply stared at the ground. My heart broke as I looked at my son in the rearview mirror. He reminded me of another little boy, a little fatherless boy whose absent mother didn't care, a little boy who shut himself off from the world. Seeing my son like this reminded me of myself. "Hey buddy, you're gonna have so much fun and meet so many new people today, and when you get home, how about you and I go to the park?" He just stared out the window. "Okay," he replied. After dropping him off and returning to my car, I just sat there in the parking lot. I hoped beyond hope that David would forget about Billy as he met his new friends at school. And for the first couple weeks, it seemed like that was the case. His mood lightened. He smiled more. I felt like I had gotten my little boy back. That is, until I got a phone call. "Hello, this is Grant," I said into my phone. "Hello, Grant. This is Miss Perkinson from your son's school. David is currently sitting in my office at the request of his teacher, Miss Williams. It seems that he has been upsetting his fellow students. If you're available, could you please come and pick him up?" "I'll be right there," I said, barely masking my confusion. What was going on? David had never acted in this way before. What was happening to my son? As I got into my car, I couldn't help but think of my wife. "I miss you, Jess," I whispered aloud. David could really use his mom right now. As I entered the principal's office, I saw my son sitting silently in a chair staring at the ground. Across the desk sat Miss Perkinson, who was tenderly trying to encourage him to speak. He looked up at me when I walked in, before his eyes moved to the empty corner across the room, where they remained fixated. Miss Perkinson stood and walked to me. In a whisper, she said, "Thank you for coming, Grant. David has been drawing some rather disturbing pictures." She handed me a folded piece of paper. "He won't listen to his teacher. Normally, he's such a good boy. This is very unusual. We're hoping some extra time with his dad will help." "Thank you, Miss Perkinson. I'll take it from here." Turning to David, I said, "Hey, buddy, we're going to spend the day together. How's that sound?" He stood up, but his eyes didn't leave the corner until I reached for his hand. As we walked out of the school, I unfolded the paper Miss Perkinson handed me. On the paper was a crude drawing of 3 stick figures. It looked like it was drawn in anger. The crayon strokes looked like they were pushed hard and aggressively. 2 of the figures stood together holding hands. One was a little boy with a wide smile on his face. The other was an extremely tall figure, completely black. Its arms and legs were far longer than its torso. Further down on the paper, the 3rd figure, lying horizontally on the page, its face was clearly sad, and red blots covered its body. I looked down at my son. "David, did you draw this?" He stared at the ground and shook his head no. Billy did. I swallowed and asked, "Is that you and Billy holding hands?" He nodded. "And the other one, is that me?" He sniffled before nodding. As we reached the car, I got down on one knee to look him in the eye. "David, could you look at me?" Slowly, his head looked up. I could see his eyes quiver as he struggled to hold back tears. My heart broke with compassion as I pulled him in for a hug. "David, I love you so much. I don't tell you that enough, and I'm sorry. You mean everything to me. I know Billy has been your friend, but right now it seems like he's not being a good friend. You should know, though, I'll always be your friend. I love you, son." He violently rubbed his eyes. "I love you too, Dad." As we pulled into the driveway, I turned to David and said, "How about you go change into your pajamas, and we'll watch some movies together? Later we can get some pizza. How's that sound?" At that, my son perked up. With a smile, he responded, "Okay." He trotted upstairs as I browsed the TV for a good movie. A moment later, a loud scream broke through the house. Adrenaline shot through my veins as I sprinted upstairs. Bursting through the bedroom door, I shouted, "David, are you okay?" I saw him lying in the corner. His body shook with uncontrollable cries. I rushed to him, gently turned him over to see his face. The left side of his face was deeply bruised, and a thin stream of blood flowed from his lip. "David, what happened?" Through tears, he said, "Billy's mad." "What?" I declared in disbelief. "I told him I don't love him anymore, and now he's mad." My body shook with anger. As I sprung to my feet, I turned and screamed to the empty room. "Who's there? Get the hell out of my house. Leave us alone." In my rage, I kicked the ball that sat in the middle of David's floor. It sailed through the air and landed in the open closet. My rant continued. Soon my anger lessened, and I stopped shouting to catch my breath. In the momentary silence, I heard a noise. I spun around in time to watch the ball I had kicked slowly roll out of the closet. Every hair on my body stood up. Without taking my eyes from the closet, I reached around for the baseball bat that lay under David's bed. My fingers found it, and taking it, I viciously swung it into the small closet. There was nothing there. The bat bounced off the wall in the back. I pushed aside the hanging clothes and found nothing. I turned back to see David, and as I did, I felt impossibly strong fingers wrapped around my neck. I gasped for air, but didn't find any. Panic began to fill my mind, as a cruel, cracked whisper from behind. "He belongs to me." The room erupted with deep, gurgled laughter as I struggled for air. Then suddenly, the fingers released, though the laughter remained. Air flooded into my lungs as I fell to my knees. I glanced behind me and saw nothing. Then I looked at my son, who cowered into the corner. His hands tightly covered his ears as he tried to drown out the laughter. In a moment I reached him, carried him in my arms, and dashed to the stairway. The laughter continued throughout the house. It wasn't until we got outside that it stopped. I'm writing this from a hotel room. David and I are leaving. I don't know where we're going, just not here. David looked at me, his face completely pale. "Dad?" "What?" "He's here," he whimpered. A knot formed in my throat. "He says he's going to kill you." He barely got the words out. I clenched my teeth and stared deep into my son's eyes. "Where is he?" He stares back at me before slightly glancing over my shoulder. "Behind you." This story is psychological because it spends most of the time making you question what's actually happening. The OP is constantly torn between believing the logical explanation that his son just has an imaginary friend, or trusting his instincts that something is horribly wrong. The next story today is from r/nosleep from user Jacksta. There's a trapdoor in my uncle's shed. It's funny how your brain can just erase a bunch of your memories, block them out for years and years, and then one day you hear, see, or smell something, and they all come rushing back. It was a wooden elephant that did it for me. It was the first thing I noticed as I stepped into Uncle Rick's living room, seemingly for the first time, but it appears I've been here before. The sight of it resting on the mantelpiece, above the open fireplace, made the whole room feel familiar. My dad shuffled past me and began to assemble the stack of flat-pack moving boxes I'd carried in from the van, while I just stood there, staring at the elephant. He wasn't in a talkative mood. His brother, my Uncle Rick, died of a heart attack last week, and with my dad being the elder one of the two, I guess it had him thinking about how long he had left. I never knew my Uncle Rick very well. Growing up, I saw him once a year, if that. He came round for Christmas a handful of times when I was a kid. I saw him at a couple of weddings over the years, couple of funerals, and for the final time last year, on his 70th birthday. He kept to himself at family gatherings, always the first to crack open a beer or pour himself something a little stronger. Always the first to leave as well. He was the walking embodiment of being worn out, both physically and mentally. The deep, darkened bags under his eyes had been there since I was a kid, some 30-odd years ago. The few times I did interact with him, he often got my name wrong. He'd call me Ben, then quickly correct himself. I always found that quite odd. It's not remotely similar to my name. "William," my dad snapped. "Are you going to give me a hand, or what?" "Yeah, sorry, I was in a world of my own." He grunted in response. He'd already filled 2 boxes. I grabbed a box and took it over to the fireplace. The mantelpiece was covered in little trinkets, mostly carved from wood. I studied them as I packed them carefully away. An acorn, a hand, a dragon, a skull, a pig, all made from the same wood, probably by the same hand. I picked up the elephant last, and as I held it, my uncle's voice came rushing back to me. "Ben, William, that's not a toy, put it down." I remember him lurching out of his armchair and stumbling across the room toward me, his hand outstretched before him. "Sorry," I had said as I scrambled to put it back before he reached me. "Why don't you go play outside, in the garden?" he suggested, his face full of worry. He led me through the kitchen and opened the back door. The memory faded. As I came back to my senses, I realized I had placed the elephant back on the mantel. I kept thinking about it as I carried on packing. I had this nagging feeling that there was someone else there too, but I couldn't quite recall who. I thought about asking my dad about it, but he looked to be in a terrible state. He doesn't deal with death too well, not after Mom died. Uncle Rick was our last remaining relative. There was another thing my brain had blocked out. I remember Mom alive and well, and I remember her funeral, but I've got nothing in between. She died of breast cancer when I was 10. By the time they'd found it, it was far too late, and she deteriorated rapidly over a couple of weeks. Anyone who'd visited her in her final moments described her end as a blessing, a mercy. I had always been thankful that my brain had allowed me to forget. We finished up the living room and piled it all into the van. My dad poured us both a mug of coffee from his thermos, and we sat in silence on the tailgate, the summer breeze cooling my sweat-stained t-shirt. "Well," Dad said, patting my knee as he rose to his feet. He finished his sentence with a wordless grumble as we began to head back inside. I gulped down the rest of my lukewarm coffee and followed after him. He was disappearing up the stairs with an armful of flat-packed boxes as I stepped through the front door. I grabbed a few myself, then wandered through to the kitchen. Even with the lights on, the room felt oppressive. The only window was on the side of the house and pointed directly at the neighbor's garden fence. The sink was piled high with dishes, so I had to wash and dry them all before packing them away. It was the most basic kitchen I'd seen in a while. No kettle, no toaster, no microwave. The fridge appeared to be the only thing plugged into the wall. Once all the cupboards were empty, I unrolled a black bin bag and opened the fridge. I took a step back as the smell reached my nostrils. Each shelf was stacked high with shrink-wrapped cuts of steak. The door pockets were stuffed full of pig ears, trotters, and various other cured offcuts. I pulled my t-shirt up over my nose, trying to block out mental images of Uncle Rick eating pig snouts for dinner. As I emptied the contents of the fridge into the bag, some of the steak must have gone off long before he had died. I hoped he had been feeding a whole pack of stray dogs or something. I wrapped a second bin bag around the first and tied them both tight to contain the smell. I would not be putting that in the van. The bin men could deal with it on their next round. I lugged the bag over to the back door, turned the latch, and stepped out into the garden. I caught a glimpse of the shed at the far end, and it all came rushing back to me. I was 10 years old when I last visited my uncle's house. I'm sure of that now. I remember my dad dropping me at the door on his way back to the hospital. I remember my uncle saying, "I'm sorry about your mother. I truly am." You have to stay strong for your father and yourself." I remember crying on his doorstep, him awkwardly patting my shoulder. Worst of all, I remember my mom, my last true memory of her, lying in a hospital bed, hooked up to tubes, a skeleton of her former self. The color drained from her skin, the warmth drained from her eyes. I wish this version of her had remained forgotten, but instead it overwrote every other image I could bring to mind. I dropped the bag of rancid meat into the gray bin and looked back towards the shed, the small pond. I remember 10-year-old me sulking through the garden, crouching down by the pond, staring vacantly into the water. I'd been looking down into the murky, green abyss when the shed door slowly creaked open. I watched as someone stepped out onto the grass with bare feet. A little boy, much younger and smaller than me. He wore only a baggy, tattered t-shirt, far too big for him, trailing down to his ankles. His skin was almost paper white, and he didn't have a single hair on his head. His face lit up with pure glee when he saw me. He scampered towards me holding a wooden airplane above his head, trying his best to sound like one. I remember playing with him in the garden, chasing after him as he giggled to himself, running away when he tried to catch me. I'm not sure how long we played in the garden for, but I recall that he never spoke a word. He wouldn't let me play with the wooden plane either. I remember him snatching it from me as I picked it up off the grass. I remember there was something not quite right with his hands, something strange about them, but I'm not sure exactly what. After a while, he led me to the shed. He opened the door, but there was nothing inside. He got down on his knees and lifted a panel on the floor. The hinges groaned as the trapdoor opened, revealing a wooden staircase that went down into the darkness. "Ben," Uncle Rick called from the back door. "Sorry, William, your dad's here." The boy scuttled down the stairs and the trapdoor slammed shut behind him. I remember the feeling of dread resurfacing. My dad standing in the living room with red, puffy eyes, his choking wail as the world spilled out of him. "It's your mother. She's gone." Fresh tears rolled down my cheeks as I stood frozen in the garden, my eyes locked on the shed, my hands still holding up the lid of the gray bin. My feet started carrying me towards the shed before I'd even made the thought to move, my subconscious mind prioritizing curiosity as my conscious mind overwhelmed itself with feelings I had not yet processed. I pulled open the creaky door. The shed was empty except for an old, ragged rug that covered most of the floor. I rolled the rug back, exposing the well-worn edges of the trapdoor. The hinges must have corroded long ago. The entire panel came free in my hands. I stacked it against the wall of the shed and looked down into the dark. I pulled my phone from my pocket, turned on the torch, and descended the stairs. The first thing I laid my eyes on in the dim light from my phone was a wooden elephant. Not just one of them, but a whole pile of them, almost identical to the one in Uncle Rick's living room. The space down there was much bigger than I had expected. The ground, walls, and ceiling looked to be raw earth, like the whole place had been dug out, yet had somehow not collapsed. My phone only illuminated a few meters ahead of me, leaving a black void up ahead, the silence unsettling. I walked further along, dragging my feet. There were piles upon piles of wooden carvings littered about, some similar to the ones I'd packed, something like nothing I'd seen before. I continued on. My light caught the edge of a bright white branch or tree root, gnarled and twisted, spanning the length of the space up ahead. I shone the light from one end to the other. It appeared to sway a little, then it folded in the center, and the end of it reached out towards me. It stopped just a foot shy of my face, then came to rest on the ground, and I suddenly realized what I was looking at. That strange hand with too many fingers, too many thumbs, some fingers thicker than others, some bending the wrong way. The boy's hand. His face drifted towards me from the darkness, his cheeks gaunt, his skin sallow, his eyes sunken. His head lifted towards the ceiling, turning at a right angle on his neck when he ran out of space. His other arm clawed into the wall on my right as he dragged his foot beneath him, his knee almost reaching the ceiling too. I turned to run and he shrieked, sending a jolt of pain through my ringing ears, turning my legs to jelly. Lumps of earth rained down on me as he forced himself through the space behind me. Adrenaline took over and I ran faster than I had in years. The narrow rectangle of light on the stairs getting closer and closer with every step. I could hear his rasping breath following closely. My foot made contact with the bottom step. Then his hand squeezed tighter on my waist. He lifted me effortlessly towards his face. He sniffed at me, and his expression shifted. He looked into my eyes and smiled a crooked, haggard smile, faintly reminiscent of when he was young. I heard clumsy footsteps coming down the stairs. His smile faded as he looked beyond me. I craned my neck to see my dad standing on the bottom step, his arm juddering uncontrollably as he pointed at me. "Ben, you put him down now," he shouted with false confidence in his voice. The next few seconds were a blur. I heard the sounds of bones cracking, saw my dad rush past me like a rag doll, and Ben's other hand as I fell from his grip. Pain burned through my wrist from my awkward landing. I looked up from the floor in horror. My dad hung limp, his arms at his sides, his head fully enveloped in Ben's mouth. A strangled groan coming from within. Ben wrapped a hand around my dad's feet and pulled him apart. He chewed noisily as I dragged myself to the stairs, fighting the urge to gag. His long arm reached over my shoulder. His hand opened in front of my face. A wooden airplane lay in his palm. He jerked it closer to my face, as if he was offering it to me. Without thinking, I took it and looked back at him. He smiled, entrails hanging from his teeth, blood pouring down his chin, then went back to eating. I climbed up the stairs and replaced the trapdoor, then the rug, and drove home in silence. I don't know what's come over me, but tomorrow I'm gonna buy as much steak as I can. This story's such a banger. I absolutely love this one. It's not necessarily the creature beneath the shed that makes this one psychological. It's the way that the OP's repressed memories slowly dismantle his sense of reality. The next story today is from r/NoSleep from user Dr. AK Mist. I've started timing how long it takes me to stop thinking about it. The record is 9 minutes. I work on the 6th floor of a building with mirrored windows that make the sky look dirtier than it is. I'm a junior analyst, and I consider myself an ambitious individual. More like quietly ambitious, in the embarrassing way people are when they still believe good work gets noticed. I stay late, I reply quickly, I volunteer for things nobody wanted. What gets noticed in this place, I learned, is usefulness. People can smell that from 3 cubicles away. I mean, everyone likes a useful guy in the workplace. Maybe that's the reason everyone likes Rafiq. Rafiq is our senior manager. He always wears pale shirts with the sleeves rolled exactly twice. The kind of man who remembers your coffee order and whose mother was ill and whose team lead was quietly trying to push you out. He has a lightness to him. He could walk into a tense meeting and make everyone feel like they'd been overreacting. And I learned that firsthand 6 months ago. It was a day I made a mistake in a client model. Not catastrophic, but close. A director named Farhana decided it wasn't incompetence, but pure dishonesty. The meeting where she said it was small, which made it worse. Small meetings gives you nowhere to hide. Rafiq was there because his team had briefly touched the project. He didn't have to say anything, but he did. He leaned back, crossed one ankle over the other, and said, "No, that's not what happened." Then he walked them through it, calmly, with dates, with email timestamps. Just enough criticism of my carelessness to sound objective, but not enough to let anyone call me malicious. The guy saved my ass when he didn't have to. Afterward, he handed me a paper cup of coffee in the lift lobby. "Careful next time." "I will. I know." He smiled and never mentioned it again. That was part of why I trusted him. The Tuesday he asked me for the favor, it was raining hard enough that the windows looked like they were melting. He appeared at my desk at 4:12 and walked me to the narrow corridor by the stairwell where people went to take personal calls. It smelled of damp carpet and old paint. "I need to ask something slightly awkward." "Okay." "Thursday evening. If anyone asks, tell them we had dinner after work." He rubbed the back of his neck. It looked like nervousness, but it wasn't. His breathing didn't change. No sweat at his hairline. He wasn't waiting for my answer the way anxious people wait. He was waiting the way a man waits when he already knows what you're going to say. Like someone who had done the math on me long before he walked to my desk. "Chill. It's nothing dramatic. Just a sensitive personal matter." I've worked in the office for over 2 years, so I understood what was being implied. Affair. It was disappointing, not horrifying. It's the kind of small moral stain the world runs on. What time? I asked. 7:30, dinner nearby. I dropped you home after. He named a restaurant 2 blocks away. We'd both been there with teams before. I nodded. I knew you'd agree, my good man, he said. I remember feeling pleased. That's the part I hate the most. Weeks passed. No wife called. No furious woman appeared at reception. Rafiq remained Rafiq, defending juniors in budget meetings, bringing pastries, saying good work when he passed my desk. The lie dissolved. I forgot it the way you forget small debts once they've been paid. Then a detective came to our office last week. He wore a navy blue shirt and dark trousers, with shoes that were recently polished but walked in rain. Tired in the administrative way of men who spend their days asking questions nobody wants to answer. There were 4 of us in the small conference room: Detective Hassan, the HR business partner, Rafiq, and me. The detective thanked us for our time. He was reconstructing the movements of a missing woman, last seen Thursday evening near our building. He placed a printed photograph on the table. Young, dark hair, a small mole beside her left eyebrow, a smile like someone had said something just before pressing the button. Alright, I'm gonna pause there for a second. Guys, what are we thinking? Is Rafiq like the super nice guy, but he actually like eats people's souls or something? I don't know, I could have just said murderer. Anyways, let's continue. Did either of you see her? He asked. No, I replied, because that was the truth. Rafiq shook his head slowly. I'm sorry, I've never seen this person. That "I'm sorry" landed strangely. You don't apologize for not recognizing a stranger. Mr. Rafiq, the detective checked his notes. We understand you were in the area that evening. He gave the date. The date entered the room like cold air. My body remembered before my mind did. Rafiq turned slightly toward me. Not enough for the detective to notice, or maybe enough, and simply waited. Not pleading, not warning, just waiting, with that same patient stillness from the stairwell. Yes, Rafiq said. I had a late dinner nearby. With him. The detective turned to me. This was muscle memory. The lie already had walls, a roof, furniture. All I did was step inside. Yes, I said. 7:30, the restaurant. He dropped me at home around 9. Thank you, Detective Hassan said. That's helpful. The word has lived in me ever since. In the corridor afterward, Rafiq caught my eye. He held my gaze for exactly 1 second longer than relief would require. Not threatening, not grateful, just measuring. Measuring like a man confirming that an investment had performed as expected. Then he nodded and walked away. 2 days later, a coffee appeared on my desk. Americano, no sugar. My order. There was no note. None was required, to be honest. Later that afternoon, the HR business partner sent a thread to the floor. It was a soft, distressed paragraph about how awful the whole situation was, how she hoped it would be resolved soon, how she trusted everyone was doing okay. It was the kind of formal email that you skim through lazily while paying just enough attention to not miss anything important. One sentence of the email made me chuckle. Let us all pray and hope that the detective does not return to our premises again. That was oddly specific for an HR email. She's been legitimately spooked by the detective. I found it oddly amusing. 12 people replied with varying lengths of corporate sympathy. That was enough bootlicking for the day, so I didn't feel the need to reply. Rafiq did reply, at 4:12, with just 2 words. He will. Nobody asked what he meant. I think nobody wanted to. That brings me to what happened 2 days back, when I had to access the shared drive before a client meeting. I had a legitimate reason to be in his files. He had forwarded me a folder link before the meeting saying, "Pull the Q3 deck, I'll be 5 minutes late." The folder opened and I started looking for the deck he asked for. I didn't know exactly where the file was, so I started browsing the entire directory. Nested inside, between 2 project folders, was a third one. No label, just a date range. I should have closed it, but I didn't. The folder had photographs, dozens of them, women with different faces, in different settings. A street corner, a restaurant window, a parking lot at dusk. None of them looking at the camera, all of them unaware. The angles too low, too patient, too precise to be accidental. The kind of pictures that make you think these were clicked without consent. I didn't recognize any of these women until I did. Round face, clear skin, a small mole beside her left eyebrow. I closed the folder. I closed the laptop. I sat at my desk for what felt like a long time, looking at my own hands. Then I heard Rafiq's voice in the corridor. He was slightly out of breath, mid-laugh at something someone had said. I opened a spreadsheet and stared at it until he walked past. "Did you find it, good man?" He called over. "Yes," I said. "I knew you would." He didn't know exactly what I had found, or maybe he did, and he still wasn't afraid. I still don't know which is worse. I was in the parking lot the following evening when Detective Hassan called. A few follow-up questions, routine, nothing to worry about. Through the windshield, the office building glowed in neat rows. Somewhere on the 6th floor, Rafiq was probably still at his desk. Hassan told me they had checked the restaurant. The staff remembered Rafiq on Thursday evening at 7:30, having dinner with a man who matched my description. Rafiq was apparently a regular customer, so everyone remembered him vividly. My account was consistent. "That's all we needed. Thank you for your time." I said something. I don't remember what. I sat with the phone in my lap and waited to feel relieved. The feeling didn't come. My phone vibrated on my lap. I pulled it away. Rafiq calling. I didn't answer. Another call came, then a third. I don't know why the restaurant confirmation made everything feel worse instead of better. I've been trying to work that out for hours, and I still can't. Maybe you can. I was clean, at least in the eyes of the police, but my conscience wasn't. I thought about the woman with the round face and a small mole beside her left eyebrow. I thought about the folder, the date range, the dozens of women, none of them looking at the camera. And I thought about how the restaurant confirmed it too cleanly and too readily, as if someone there had also been waiting to be asked. I had to make a decision, and the choices arranged themselves with the clean cruelty of a spreadsheet. Confirm the alibi, and it becomes permanent, no longer muscle memory. A deliberate choice made with full knowledge of that folder and every face inside it. Retract it, and I become the man who gave a false alibi in a missing persons case. The one who waited. The one who accessed colleagues' files and said nothing. The security barrier lifted. I had two options. Left towards the main road, towards the police station. Right towards home. The car behind me tapped its horn once. I turned right. I've started timing how long it takes me to stop thinking about her face. The record is 9 minutes. I said it this morning on the drive in. I don't think I'll beat it today. I don't know why I'm posting this. That's not true. I know exactly why, actually. I don't know if Rafiq hurt her. I don't know if she's alive. I don't know what those photographs mean, or how many folders there are, or how long the date range goes back. What I know is that I turned right, and I know what turning right means. If you're reading this, and you think I should go to the police, I know. I already know. Tell me something I can actually do something with. Tell me how to walk into that station and explain why I lied twice, why I waited, why I opened that folder, why I turned right when I could have turned left. Tell me how to do that without destroying the only life I have carefully built. Tell me. I'll wait. What makes this one deserve a spot on this list is that there's no obvious monster. It's just an ordinary guy making increasingly difficult choices. Sometimes the scariest prison isn't one you get locked into. It's one you build inside your own head. The next one's from r/no sleep from user I'm Funerals. I'm a wastewater operator for the county. Something came through our system last week, and I'm never drinking tap water again. I've been a wastewater operator for my county for going on 8 years now. Most people don't want to think about what happens when they flush the toilet, and most of the time, neither do I. I work the overnight shift at the county's water reclamation facility, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 5 nights a week. In a facility this size, I'm the only person on site. Because of the risk of hydrogen sulfide gas pockets or falling into an aeration tank, the county required me to wear one of those T-Pass safety pagers. It's a clunky orange motion sensor clipped to my belt. If the internal accelerometer doesn't detect movement for around a minute, it enters a pre-alarm. If I don't tap the reset button, the whole facility's external sirens go off and a GPS emergency ping hits the sheriff's department. H2S builds up in enclosed spaces, sewers, lift stations, and the areas around the open tanks. It smells like rotten eggs at low concentrations, which sounds manageable until you learn that once it hits a higher concentration, it paralyzes your sense of smell. You stop detecting it right around the time it starts killing you. People have died thinking they were fine. People have gone down into a confined space to check on a coworker and died right next to them without understanding what was happening. So, the county gives me a pager. I've never triggered the full alarm in 8 years. Last week, I triggered it at 3:30 in the morning. I've called in sick every day since. I have a case and a half of bottled water on my kitchen counter, and I've not touched my tap since I got home Friday morning. I'm writing this down because my stomach has felt wrong since Saturday, and tonight I walked to my bathroom sink on autopilot and had the tap running and my hand underneath it before I caught myself. The facility runs on routine. That's the whole job, really. 8 years of the same routine executed correctly so that the people of Yoseki turn on their taps in the morning and clean water comes out, and they never think about where it's been or what was done to it, or who spent the night making sure it was safe enough to drink. I don't resent that. I genuinely don't. I knew what the job was when I took it. Thursday night started like every other Thursday night. I arrived at 10:52 p.m. and did my usual handoff with Dale from the evening shift. Dale said nothing out of the ordinary happened. Equipment all nominal, one pump in the secondary clarifier running a little warm, but was within acceptable range. I logged it, told him I'd monitor it, and he left. I heard his truck start in the parking lot, and then it was just me. First thing I always do is walk the facility, because years of overnight shifts teach you that the best diagnostic tool you have is your own body moving. I walk the perimeter of the primary sedimentation tank, the first big settling basin where everything that comes through the county's collection system arrives before treatment begins. Solids sink to the bottom, scum floats to the top, and the middle layer moves forward. It's not a pleasant thing to look at up close, but after a while, it's just data. I walked the secondary clarifiers, checked the aeration basins, and looked at the SCADA readouts on the control room monitors. Flow rates, chemical dosages, turbidity levels, dissolved oxygen, all nominal. I logged everything and settled in. The pager chirped at 11:47 p.m. I hit reset without thinking. I've done it so many times, it's pretty much muscle memory now. The chirp, the reach, the button, the mute, everything was fine. At 12:30 a.m., I collected my routine grab samples. This is exactly what it sounds like. You take a small jar to specific points in the system, collect a sample of whatever is moving through at that moment, and bring it back to the lab for testing. pH, ammonia, turbidity, fecal coliform. The readings tell you how the treatment is progressing and whether anything needs to be adjusted. I've collected thousands of these samples. I can look at a jar and tell you, before I even run the tests, roughly what I'm going to find. I held the jar from the primary sedimentation tank up to the fluorescent light in the lab. I looked at it for a long time, and the color was wrong. Primary tank samples are never pretty. They're gray-brown, opaque, full of suspended solids. That's all normal. That's exactly what you want to see at that stage because it means the system is working. This was darker, something closer to black. A cloudiness that sat differently in the jar, more diffuse, the way dye distributes when you drop it into a glass. The smell was wrong. Under the baseline shit stench, there was something sweet, like clover or honey. I took a second sample, and it was identical. I logged both as anomalous and noted the color deviation and smell irregularity in my shift log. Then I ran them through the treatment protocol. The pager chirped at 1:03 a.m. I hit reset. I waited for the results. I want to explain what the treatment process is supposed to do. Things go in one end of that process, looking like what comes out of drains, toilets, and industrial pipes. They come out the other end as water. Clean water. Testable, measurable, and compliant with EPA standards. I've run that process probably 1,000 times, and it's worked every single time because it's designed to. I ran my samples through. I looked at the results. I picked up both jars and held them up to the fluorescent light again. They looked identical to when I had started. The same diffuse cloudiness and the same black tint. I stood in that lab for a long time, just holding those 2 jars. Then I checked my equipment because obviously something had to be wrong with it. My equipment was fine. I ran the protocol again. Same result. I set the jars down on the bench very carefully. Then I got the microscope. I don't know how long I stood there looking at the slide. Long enough that the pager chirped and I hit reset without looking up from the eyepiece. Under the microscope, the cloudiness resolved into structure. Not the kind of suspended solid I know how to identify and treat. Not anything the process was designed for, because this did not belong in water. It was hair. Tiny orange tufts so small they had passed through the initial screening without catching, distributed so evenly through the sample that they created the diffuse cloudiness I'd seen in the jar. Thousands of them, maybe more. Too small to count and too numerous to try. I know hair under a microscope. Not well, not professionally, but enough. The structure is distinct. The way it catches light is hard to miss. No part of my brain was going to look at that slide and call it anything else. It was hair. I ran the treatment protocol one more time. I looked at the result. I picked up my clipboard and I wrote in my shift log. 237. Noted atypical turbidity reading in primary sedimentation grab sample. Color deviation from baseline. Smell irregularity noted. Second sample collected. Consistent results. Treatment protocol run 3 times. No change in turbidity. Logged for morning review. Because what else do you write? What form exists for this? At 3:12, the SCADA system flagged a flow irregularity in the main intake pipe. I stared at the monitor for a moment before I understood what I was looking at. The inflow rate was fluctuating rhythmically. A pattern, expansion, and contraction at regular intervals that my brain kept trying to map onto something familiar and kept failing. It was the wrong rhythm for water. It was the right rhythm for something breathing. I logged it and called the after-hours line. I was told to monitor and document. I said yes, hung up, and stood at the monitor watching the fluctuation move slowly in the direction of the primary sedimentation tank. The pager chirped. I hit reset. Guys, I'm feeling like there's something significant to the pager chirped. I hit reset. I'm not liking it. Also, why's the water breathing? Anyways, let's continue. I went to the tank. The access hatch is a heavy steel panel set into the walkway above the primary basin. There's a specific shit smell that comes up when you crack it, and you learn to turn your face away and let the initial wave pass before you lean over to look. I turned my face away. I let the wave pass, and then I smelled it. That warm clover from the sample jars, rising from the tank in a way that made my stomach turn over. I leaned over and looked down. The beam of my flashlight went further than it should have. Primary tank water is opaque. You can't see more than a few inches into it normally because of the suspended solids. The particulate, everything the county flushes and drains on a given night. I could see the bottom. The water was clear. Whatever was in it had displaced the suspended solids somehow, pushed them aside and settled them in a ring around the perimeter of the tank so that the center was open and transparent in a way I had never seen. And on the floor of the tank, I could see texture. Just texture pressed against the concrete floor of the basin. Something that covered most of the visible surface. Something that looked like matted wet fur. Flattened by the weight of the water above it. Dark with submersion and moving very slightly with a current that shouldn't have been there because the inflow wasn't moving fast enough to create it. Moving the way living things move and dead things don't. I stood there. The facility sounds were gone. I could see the gauges holding steady, the pump still running, but the sound of it had simply stopped reaching me. I stood there anyway. My flashlight beam moved across the floor of the tank slowly, following the texture, and near the far edge of the basin where the shadow was deepest, I saw something that I've been trying to find a different explanation for every night since Thursday. I haven't. A face. Not clearly, it was in the way you sometimes see a face in the grain of wood or the pattern of a ceiling, and your brain assembles it from fragments, and once it's assembled, you can't take it apart again, no matter how hard you try. It was looking up. It had been looking up since before I opened the hatch. The pager blared. The full alarm. The one that means 5 minutes have passed, and I haven't moved, and somewhere in the county, a computer's deciding whether to call the sheriff. I ran, hit the reset panel, and logged back into the SCADA. I stood in the control room with my back against the wall and my clipboard against my chest. At 3:47 a.m., my phone rang. The sheriff's department's automated line. The ping had gone out. I told them I was fine and that the equipment malfunctioned on the pager. False alarm. I finished my shift. I don't remember most of it. I know I logged the SCADA readings at the required intervals. I know I filed the anomaly report, and I know I walked out to my truck at 7:03 a.m. and sat in the parking lot for a while to calm my nerves before I could make myself drive. I stopped at the gas station on Route 9 on the way home and bought 2 cases of water. That was 6 days ago. My supervisor called me on Saturday to check in. I told him I had a stomach thing. He said to take the time I need and let him know when I'm ready to come back. I honestly don't know when that's going to be. I've been going through the bottled water fast. I keep forgetting. I'll be making coffee and reach for the tap before I catch myself. I'll be brushing my teeth and realize halfway through that I filled the cup from the sink without thinking. Each time I catch it in time. I think I catch it in time. My stomach has felt wrong since Saturday. Like I've become aware of it in a way I never was before. I need to get a glass of water. I've been writing for hours, and I haven't had anything to drink, and I'm thirsty. I have 3 bottles left in the case on the counter. I should get one of those. I will get one of those. I got up to get one. The tap is running. I don't remember turning it on. I'm standing at the sink, and the water is running over my hand, and it's been running for a while, because my sleeve is wet up to my elbow, and I don't... God, the water is very warm. That's not right. I have it on cold. I need to... I'm looking at my hand under the water, and there's something... My back molars are starting to ache. Damn, the vibration is so strong, I can feel it in my cheekbones. The water is... I can smell the clover through the steam. I should call the sheriff, but I'm going to sit here for a minute instead. I'm just so tired, and it's been a long time since I've felt this safe. In this one, everything that once made the OP feel safe becomes a source of dread. An ordinary routine turns into a nightmare. Everything stops making sense and his confidence unravels until he can't even trust his own senses or actions. The next one's from r/nosleep from user More Tanks. Every morning my family watches me die at the breakfast table. We were having breakfast together, like every morning. We sat in the massive dining room, quietly eating scrambled eggs, bacon, salad, or buttered toast, whatever each of us wanted. Dad sat across from me, Mom and my brother to my right. Sister sat on my left. I wasn't eating. I hadn't felt hungry since yesterday. My thoughts were racing, and I simply didn't have the space in my head for anything else. The very first thought that set the rusted gears in my brain turning was this. Why don't any of us work? Neither Mom or Dad ever leaves the house for long. My brother goes out sometimes, and occasionally my sister goes with him, but never for very long. Then another thought sent me further down the slope. Why don't my siblings and I look alike? My brother was a huge man. His short, black, curly hair and sharp nose made it seem like he might have come from somewhere in Latin America. His eyes were always watching everything, as if he were waiting for something to attack or for an enemy to appear. My sister was short but muscular. She always wore her thin blonde hair in a ponytail, and her eyes were those of a predator. I could see the way she observed everything, her gaze almost flickering, like she was a hair's breadth away from slitting someone's throat. Mom and Dad, on the other hand, were completely different. I didn't fear them the way I feared my siblings. They just watched, studied. Both were small, thin people. Mom wore glasses and kept adjusting them, pretending she wasn't staring at me. Dad's graying hair was always perfectly combed, and he was always asking questions. Only me. How I was feeling, what I had done, why I made certain choices. As if he were constantly filling out some kind of questionnaire about me. And then there was me. I stared at my reflection in the picture sitting in the middle of the table. A hollow-faced, bald figure stared back. I looked more like a shadow than a real person. With a distant gaze, I studied the people sitting around me, my so-called family. Then the realization hit me like a lightning strike. I don't know these people. Worse, this isn't my family. I tightened the grip on the fork. It felt like the world had flipped upside down, my mind unable to process the flood of thoughts crashing into it. A wave of nausea hit me at the same time as a strange, gnawing hunger. My throat went dry instantly, and my vision blurred. "Are you okay, son?" my father asked, breaking the silence. He studied me carefully, and I forced myself back into reality. His eyes examined me. His face was old, but his gaze was sharp. Sharp like a young fox's. I didn't answer. I just looked at the others staring at me. All of them were watching, like I was some kind of circus attraction, waiting to see what I would do next. The problem was, I had no idea what that would be. "Did you take your medication?" my brother asked from my right. I stared at his moving lips, watching the way the words formed. The way his voice vibrated in the air, and all I could think was, why don't I remember anything? I knew our daily routine. I knew what we did every day. I knew whose room was whose. I knew Mom and Dad slept separately. But I didn't remember anyone from before. No memories of us as children, no image of my parents being younger. I didn't even know the names of the two people who claimed to be my parents. "Are you with us, son?" my father asked again. The curiosity on his face was beginning to harden into suspicion. Still, I said nothing. My eyes drifted toward the sliding door on the left. The kitchen was that way. Beyond it, through another door, lay the enormous backyard. My brother shifted. His massive, shovel-like hand slipped beneath the table. Without taking his eyes off me, he slowly brought it back up. Something metallic glinted in his grip. The tip of a needle, an injection. For me? The thought shot through my brain. And then, like prey sensing the predator, an alarm blared inside my head. I need to run. In one swift motion, I drove the silver fork I'd been clutching straight into my brother's forearm. He howled in pain. But I didn't have time to care. I had to get out. I knocked my chair backward and practically launched myself away from the table. Mom and Dad didn't move. But my sister's speed shocked me. I had barely started toward the kitchen when she was suddenly right there in front of me. Something gray flashed in her hand. Then she hit me. Hard enough that the world instantly went black. The next thing I knew, I was on the floor. My sister stepped beside me. She was wearing brass knuckles. Oh my gosh. Pain flooded my entire body, radiating from my face. My jaw had to be broken. I was pretty sure I'd lost a few teeth. "You motherfucker," my massive brother growled as he staggered over me. Blood dripped from his hand. The last thing I saw was the sole of his boot. The sour scent of blueberries twisted gently into my nose. I blinked hard until my vision cleared. I was sitting at the massive dining table again. Breakfast was spread out before us like some kind of endless feast. Scrambled eggs and bacon, pancakes drenched in maple syrup, buttered toast, cereal, cold cuts, and the large pitcher where my reflection stared back at me once more. My father had just taken his seat across from me. He sat down elegantly and immediately grabbed a boiled egg and a couple slices of toast. My mother sat to my left beside my sister, my brother on the right, alone. There was a strange, tiny healed wound on his hand. Everything was exactly the same as every other morning, just like it always was. Except a moment ago, I had attacked them. I swallowed the saliva pooling in my mouth. With desperate dread, I stared at the glass beside the bowl of fresh blueberries. Next to the beautiful orange juice rested a large yellow capsule. Should I take it? Have I been taking it? I looked up at my father. He wasn't eating. He was watching me. studying every tiny movement, analyzing what I would do, what I would reach for. What the hell is this? I wanted to panic, to stand up and sweep everything off the table, but I didn't care. What happened to me earlier? Are you all right, son? My father asked, his tone clinical, like a family doctor observing a patient. I didn't answer immediately. I had no idea what to say. I only knew one thing. I had to get out of here. I needed to escape somewhere they couldn't watch me, somewhere I could gather my thoughts and figure out what was wrong. Because something was very, very wrong. And somehow it felt like everyone else already knew exactly what it was. I need to use the bathroom, I said quietly. Go ahead, son, my father replied simply. Not a single muscle moved on his face. I stood up from the table, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. For a moment, I was certain I would collapse the second I got to my feet. They were all watching me again, like analysts. My head felt ready to explode from the tension. I just needed to get out. The moment I stepped through the door leading into the foyer, I heard a chair scrape behind me. Through the half-closed door, I glanced back into the dining room. My brother was standing, and he was coming straight after me. I quickly shut the door and hurried past the wooden staircase leading upstairs. By the time I reached the bathroom at the end of the hallway, I was practically running. I heard the door open behind me, my brother's heavy footsteps closing in. I dove into the bathroom and locked it. I thought I might piss myself. Fear and confusion churned inside me. Who are these people? What are they doing to me? Why are we pretending to be a family? Leaning against the door, I gasped for air. My stomach trembled. Hey, little brother, you didn't take your medication. My brother pounded on the door immediately. I said nothing. No sound came out of my mouth. Not a single coherent thought formed. Just panic. Hello? He slammed the door again. Don't do this. You have to take it before breakfast. Who the hell are you? I blurted out, terrified. I shouldn't have spoken. The man outside kicked the door so hard it exploded inward, sending me crashing to the floor beneath it. My brother stormed into the bathroom like a bear. No! I screamed, crawling out from under the shattered door. Leave me alone. Help! Who exactly are you yelling for? He asked coldly. I don't know why this guy's making me think of like Roderick Heffley. Like that's who I'm imagining. As I writhed on the floor like a desperate worm, he grabbed me. His massive hands clamped around my throat with crushing force, squeezing until my airways shut. I flailed, trying to get a grip on him, but what chance did I have against someone 3 times my size? I felt the air stop flowing into my lungs. My throat collapsed under his grip. And then the world went dark. My face stared back at me dumbly from the reflection in the water pitcher. I was sitting at the large dining table again. Breakfast had been served once more. Almost everything looked exactly the same. Almost. My brother's expression told a different story. He was glaring at his empty plate, absently playing with a butter knife. My mother was seated beside him now, as if they weren't just supervising me anymore, but him too. Are you all right, son? My father asked again. Huh? What? Sorry? I said, startled. My mind was pure chaos. I had started over twice, the same way, and yet they acted as if they didn't remember, or maybe they were pretending not to. Had it really only been twice? I asked if you're all right, my father repeated, pulling me back to reality. Yes, I replied, surprising even myself. Why did I say that? The thought raced through me. Why am I even answering this man? I swallowed hard and glanced at the glass beside my hand. Cold orange juice beaded with condensation. Next to it sat the large yellow capsule. Should I take it? Don't forget your medication, my mother said gently. I shot her a sideways look. That damn pill again. Something deep in my mind screamed not to take it. What even is it? Why would I swallow something without knowing what it does? And yet, buried somewhere inside me was the certainty that I always took it. A routine. Maybe I swallowed one every single day. My sister leaned forward in her chair, staring straight into my face. She looked exhausted, worn down, but her eyes were still sharp, still alert, and angry. I scanned every person sitting around me. My father, my mother, my brother, my sister. All of them watching me from the head of the table. My father had just opened his mouth to speak, about to say something, maybe ask another question, but I was faster. I snatched the yellow pill, shoved it into my mouth, and swallowed it whole. My father murmured, clearly changing whatever he had planned to say. Interesting. The moment he spoke, a strange sensation seized me, a sudden sickness rising from somewhere deep inside. My vision blurred, my reflection in the pitcher smeared into nothing. The others calmly leaned back in their chairs, still observing me. Help, I whimpered, my voice breaking. No one moved, they just watched. It felt like my head had been plunged underwater, waves crashing over it again and again. A cold sweat drenched me as the room flipped upside down. Then my forehead slammed into the dining table with a massive crack. This won't work, I heard my mother say. Sliding from my chair like a lifeless sack of flour, I collapsed beneath the table. I heard footsteps, but I could no longer see. Help, I breathed out with my final exhale. I let out a deep sigh. The table again. My reflection stared back at me from the pitcher. The face looking back was mine, yet somehow unfamiliar. A warm breeze brushed across my skin, and only then did I realize that one of the large windows facing the backyard was open. Outside, the summer sun was already shining brightly. Are you all right, son? My father asked, setting his notebook beside his plate. He served himself scrambled eggs and a few strips of bacon. My mother was only drinking coffee this time. My brother was eating slices of melon. My sister was nowhere to be seen. I glanced down at the table. The small yellow capsule was there again, a glass of water beside it. I raised my hand to grab it, but something held me back. I shouldn't take it. The thought flashed through my mind. So, son, how are you feeling? My father repeated, adjusting the collar of his shirt. How long are we going to keep playing this game? I asked coldly, locking eyes with him. Straight into those aging, tired brown eyes. My brother froze, lowering his slice of melon. He looked from me to our father. My mother stopped sipping her coffee, her eyes widening. What? My father asked, poorly masking his surprise. What game? All of this, I snapped, starting from the same place every time. What do you want from me? Why do we keep doing this over and over? My father adjusted his glasses and leaned back in his chair. He picked up his small notebook and examined me like an examiner grading a test. How many times do you think we've done this? He asked. A bead of sweat rolled down his forehead. I don't know, I said, glancing at my brother, who watched me with stern eyes. Many times maybe, but what's the point of this? You tell me, my father replied after jotting something down. No, I slammed my hand on the table. Enough. I want answers. Why are you doing this to me? He didn't respond, just raised an eyebrow as if waiting for me to answer my own question. I want to hear it, I shouted. Who are you? What are you doing to me? We are your family, he said flatly, writing another line in his notebook. That's definitely not true, I shot back. Then who is your family? He asked, his gaze sharp. I could see it again, the analysis, watching what I said, how I said it, trying to understand why I said it. The entire performance was starting to drive me insane. I don't know, my voice trembled, but I know it's not you. My father sighed, not a defeated sigh, but the kind someone makes when they've just realized something important, as if he were standing on the brink of a major discovery, needing only a final spark. Will you just say something? I yelled after the long silence. Calm down, son, he said, pushing his glasses back up his nose. Why are you so agitated? Oh, screw you, I snapped, jumping to my feet. You're going to tell me everything right now or... Sit down, my brother cut in, rising from his chair. Oh, you shut the hell up too. I pointed at him, backing away from the table. Don't touch me. I've had enough. My brother stared at me with murderous attention. He looked like he was one breath away from charging. I kept backing toward the kitchen. Now that my sister wasn't here like the first time, I saw my chance to escape. My brother stepped away from the table, tracking me with his eyes, ready to pounce. What's the point of this, son? My father asked lazily, biting into a strip of bacon. You want answers? Come sit down and you'll have them. I don't believe a word you say. I shook my head. Only a few steps remained between me and the kitchen door. Then my brother lunged. He thundered toward me like a bull. I leapt twice and grabbed the kitchen handle. I practically dove inside, and the sudden encounter surprised all of us. My sister was there, along with some man, standing close, talking quietly. Maybe a cook, maybe a waiter. I didn't give a shit. All I could see was the open door beyond them. The backyard. I had to get out. My thin, exhausted body propelled itself forward. That door meant salvation. If I made it through, I'd be free of this nightmare, free from this insane family. Oh, for fuck's sake. I heard my sister curse as she realized who had just burst in. She shoved the man aside and sprinted after me. The kitchen door slammed open as my brother charged in behind her. It felt like some twisted children's game. Me in front, fighting for my life. My so-called siblings scrambling after me like we were playing tag. I made it outside. The soft grass stroked my bare feet in the warm summer morning. Barefoot? No time to think. Keep running toward the bushes. Then I heard a loud crack. I didn't even understand what had happened. Warmth spread across my chest. Slow, creeping warmth. My body faltered, stopped, then dropped to its knees. There was a hole above my right breast. Blood poured from it, staining the beautiful green grass red. They shot me. But who? I collapsed forward, pathetically, ass in the air, face buried in the warm earth. Blood bubbled from my mouth. Boots appeared in my fading vision. Tower, you didn't have to take the shot, I heard my brother say. We could have still had him. The world went dark, and life began to slip out of me. My hand was cold where it rested on the table. There was no sign of sunshine outside. The weather was gray and damp, and I realized we were back in the dining room eating breakfast. Again. A large bowl of pears sat on the table. Eggs, bacon, cereal, milk, and everything else. My body was intact, no hole in my chest, and in the large pitcher, my sunken, exhausted face stared back at me. Are you all right, son? My father asked, glancing up at me from his notebook. My brothers stared out at the rain with bored indifference. My sister was the only one watching me, angrily, like a sulking child. My mother was picking at a cluster of grapes, only half paying attention to me on her right. So, son, how are you feeling? My father repeated, stopping his scribbling. I'm fine, I answered simply. I see, he said, flipping a few pages in his notebook. Something strange took hold of me. Anger. Rage. I didn't care about answers anymore. I didn't want questions from him. I didn't want to wake up at this table again and again after my own death. I was done. Slowly, I reached for the fork lying on the table. I lifted it and studied my pathetic, bald reflection in its blurred surface. Is this really me? My mother was still busy with her grapes. With one sharp, deliberate motion, I drove the fork into her neck. Deep and hard. I must have hit an artery. Blood sprayed everywhere, covering my face, the white tablecloth, and the food. Holy shit! My sister jumped to her feet. My brother only now seemed to realize everything was covered in blood. He stared at the grotesque fountain in shock. But the one who surprised me was my father. I saw the shock in his eyes, but he didn't move. He watched, analyzed, studied the way my mother bled out while I climbed onto the dining table. I don't know how, but I knew there was a large kitchen knife beside the pumpkin pie. I had to get it. I crawled across the table on all fours, knocking through plates and food, and grabbed the knife. I tumbled off the table and sprang back up, wildly swinging the blade. My sister was closest. She raised her hands to defend herself, and I felt the knife slice into her palm. You idiot, she screamed, clutching her bleeding hand. A deep red cut split her right palm. Back the hell up, I shouted, all of you. I searched for an exit while waving the knife between my brother and sister. My father still hadn't moved. He sat in his chair, watching, waiting. I lunged toward him, pressed the blade to his throat, and grabbed him tight. No one comes closer, I screamed, or I'll cut his throat. Why was it harder to do this than what I did to my mother? Why did it feel like an empty threat, like something inside me was holding me back? Put the knife down, my brother said calmly, stepping closer. Stay the hell where you are, I yelled, pressing the blade harder against my father's neck. Stop this, son, my father said, breathing heavily. He wasn't terrified. Tense, yes, but not afraid, as if he knew I wouldn't actually do it. Shut up, all of you, I shouted. Let me go. Where's the exit? Why can't I ever find the way out? What I didn't notice was my sister moving. The next thing I felt was a crushing blow to my jaw. I collapsed, but I didn't let go of the knife. My father cried out in pain and grabbed his face. I hit the floor, dizzy, crawling like an insect. I tried to move. I didn't even know where. My brother rushed in and tackled me with my sister. I kicked and thrashed like a feral animal, trying to break free, but my brother pinned me down and twisted my arm. My sister wrenched the knife from my hand. Wait, my father shouted. He leaned down beside me. My brother forced my face against the cold hardwood floor, but I could still see. The flesh on my father's face hung open. The blade had torn through it grotesquely. Blood streamed down his cheek. What did you mean you can't find the exit? He asked, pressing his hand against the wound. You never even looked. I always look, I hissed, every single time. He said nothing, just stared into my eyes, as if searching for something or someone. No one moved. Blood continued pouring down his face. My arm felt like it was about to snap. And at a single silent signal from my father, my sister drove the knife between my ribs. It was cold. I could feel the warmth of the fireplace, but outside a blizzard raged. My brother sat directly beside me at the table. My sister was on my other side, rubbing her arm. There were faint signs of pain on her face. My father sat across from me at the head of the table, a small bandage on his cheek. His beard had grown long and looked unkempt. His glasses slid down his nose as he flipped through his notebook. The woman sitting next to him was someone else. The one I stabbed in the neck wasn't my mother, but this woman wasn't her either. Had they replaced her? Did someone else take her place? I couldn't make sense of it, but what surprised me even more was the face in the picture. The gaunt, sickly figure was gone. Instead, I saw the blurred reflection of a strong, healthy man. Is that me? Yes, that's me. Are you all right, son? My father asked bluntly. Yes, I answered immediately and calmly. My father looked up from his notebook, straight into my eyes. Can I go into the kitchen and make some tea? I asked, driven by some strange instinct. Of course, he said, studying me more intently. My brother shifted almost imperceptibly, ready for anything I might try. But I stood up politely, wiped my mouth, and slowly, calmly walked toward the kitchen. My sister watched me like I was some kind of inmate. The moment I stepped inside, I knew someone was following me. When I glanced back from the doorway, my brother was already rising from the table. I didn't panic. The door leading outside was locked, but something in my mind warned me, not that way. Don't run. The kitchen was empty and cold. Slowly, quietly, I pulled open a drawer, as if I already knew what I would find. I took out the metal meat tenderizer. Then I positioned myself behind the kitchen door. My brother stepped in at that exact moment. As the door shut behind him, I swung. Hard. Straight for his head. The large man dropped to his knees instantly. What the hell, you crazy bastard? He snarled. I didn't give him time. I struck again, and again, and again. He collapsed onto the floor. I stood over him, panting. No time to think. I had to go. I glanced at the door to the backyard. Not that way, something screamed inside me. I scanned the room quickly. The small dumbwaiter looked like my best option. You guys okay? I heard my sister's voice approaching, her footsteps growing louder. I dropped the tenderizer and grabbed a knife instead. I pulled open the dumbwaiter doors and climbed inside, lowering myself down with the rope into the darkness below. Damn it, my sister shouted from the kitchen. Alarm! The subject escaped. But I was already in the basement. It was dim, more like a storage room than a cellar. Food was piled everywhere. At the far end of the room, a small square garbage chute gleamed from the wall. I moved toward it, knocking over a jar in the darkness. When I pulled the metal hatch open, a nauseating stench hit me. Look at the floor, the thought flashed again. It was hard to see, but there was a grated drain there. I crouched beside it and heard water trickling below. Heavy footsteps thundered somewhere above, many of them running. They were looking for me. In the gloom, I felt along the edges of the grate and found screws. The knife fit perfectly. A coincidence? How did I know this? I loosened the screws quickly. Within a minute, the grate gave way. I dropped into the sewer immediately. It was tight, but curled up, I managed to fit. I crawled through the filthy water until I felt the tunnel begin to slope downward. Then I started sliding with the slow-moving sewage. There was nothing to grab onto. The walls were slick and disgusting. I tried to slow myself with my hands and feet, but I only sped up. Then, suddenly, the tunnel disappeared beneath me. I fell. I landed with a heavy thud on something soft. Dazed, I sat up and groped around in the darkness. High above, faint red indicator lights barely provided enough illumination. But I could feel the piles around me. They stank of rot. Flies buzzed in thick swarms. The mass beneath me was warm and mushy. As I searched through it, I became increasingly certain it wasn't what I first thought. There was fabric, clothing. Then my hand closed around a human arm. I jerked away in horror. Suddenly, a harsh light burst on with a metallic screech. A hatch opened in the ceiling. "See anything?" An unfamiliar voice called down. "Not a damn thing," another muttered, sweeping the area with a flashlight. I threw myself flat into the pile. Bloody, fecal water soaked my face, but I didn't move. Not even when I realized the dead face lying beside me was the same face I knew from the picture. All the bodies looked exactly like me. "Forget it," one of them said. "He couldn't have gotten in there anyway." "Oh, damn," the other replied. I heard rattling, a splash. The flashlight fell down beside me, casting its beam across the opposite mound. "You idiot," the other snapped. "Now we'll be the ones sent down there." Then the hatch slammed shut. As revolting as the stench was, I took a deep breath. I crawled toward the flashlight, its beam throwing monstrous shadows across the walls. The chamber was filled with corpses. Every single one of them looked like me. The room was full of my bodies. It was always me, every time. Whether from shock or the force of realization, I don't know how, but I found another drainage pipe. Using the flashlight, I crawled onward. I couldn't stop now. I had to get out. Then I saw it. Light. Bright white light. I pushed forward desperately, dragging myself through the freezing filth, and then I burst out. Again. Into a filthy stream. The rocks tore open my skin, but I didn't care. Everything was cold and buried in snow. I staggered out of the water and stopped to stare at the landscape. My feet were nearly frozen, but the silence of that moment was worth everything. Sunlight shimmered softly across the snow, turning it almost magical. Far off, between the trees, I saw a car moving slowly. I didn't know where I was, or when, but one thing I knew for certain. I was the first one to ever make it this far. This one is honestly probably the strongest one in this video for psychological horror, because it traps the character and the reader inside the same uncertainty. Like, it's psychological for us as the reader. You never know whether the family's trying to help him, control him, study him, and every answer only honestly creates more questions. By the end, the most disturbing discovery isn't the room full of bodies, it's realizing that his greatest enemy might be his own fractured perception of reality. The next story is also from No Sleep, from user Brunette Baby Doll. I ran into an old friend last week. I didn't recognize her at first. I heard all 3 syllables of my first name echo from across the Chevron parking lot before I even saw her. It was early, the morning sun just barely peeking over the horizon. The highway was still quiet. A breeze kept sticking stray hairs to my lip gloss. One hand gripped the car door, the other clutched a sweating Red Bull. I didn't recognize the voice immediately, but I should have. It was familiar, but not in a way I could immediately place. By the time I looked up, she was already walking toward me, waving like we'd just seen each other yesterday. I remember squinting at her for a second too long, not because I didn't recognize her, because I did. It was her. We met in the second grade. It was late September, still hot enough outside for heat mirages to form over the blacktop. She had bright ginger hair cut into a flat bob, and her family had just moved down from Chicago. Miss Yulee sat her beside me because I was good at making people feel welcome, which really just meant I talked too much for her liking. The entire morning was spent whispering and exchanging giggles instead of doing our work. Our birthdays were on the exact same day, down to the year. I remember both of us sort of staring at each other for a second after our discovery, like we had accidentally stumbled into our own secret kingdom. She's still the only person I'll ever truly share my birthday with. My best friend at the time was a girl named Lily from one of the other second grade classes. We'd only really been friends since the year before, but Lily had already developed a habit of acting like she owned me in the way kids sometimes do. She was visibly irritated when I invited the new girl over to sit with us at lunch, especially once she started noticing the little similarities we kept pointing out to each other. After lunch, we spent all of recess trying to avoid Lily. Our elementary school backed up against the highway, with this sprawling field beside the playground that felt enormous when you were 7. We hid under the jungle gym, inside the tube slides, behind the equipment shed we weren't supposed to touch. Every time we thought we'd lost her, Lily would appear. I remember her chasing us down like a foxhound on the grass, shrieking and running as fast as our legs could carry us. She only stopped when the bell rang and we had to go back inside. It felt funny at the time. Looking back now, I think that was probably the first time anyone tried to pull us apart. The summer between 4th and 5th grade, my mom hosted our birthday sleepover. She made rainbow cupcakes and brought special unicorn sprinkles so we could decorate them ourselves. We mostly ended up making a mess and staying up too late from the sugar rush. After my parents had gone to bed, we were on the floor in my room playing with the new Breyer horses her grandma had bought her. I was in charge of the stallion. She had claimed the mare and the foals. We were conducting a dramatic escape from an evil stable owner who wanted to sell them all off. "Be quiet. If we go over the fence too loud, he's going to wake up," I whispered, trying to deepen my voice the way I thought grown men sounded. I nudged the stallion forward. "Okay, Glitter, now." She lifted the white mare, jumping the invisible fence line between the hardwood and my carpet. Her voice shifted into character. "Come on, kids, you can do it." One by one, she moved the foals over the fence, careful and dramatic, like their safe landings were of some great importance. When the last one made it across, I followed with the stallion. "You saved us," she squealed, too loud for how late it was. Her hands flying to her mouth like my dad's lumbering footsteps would start down the hallway any second now. For a second, everything went still. She didn't move the mare anymore. She just looked at me. "I love you, Thunder." The words came out of her mouth quietly, like it was still a part of the game. After 5th grade, I moved on to the local middle school while her parents enrolled her in a private school. We saw each other a couple times throughout 6th grade, but we were both busy learning how to be around other people and figuring out what new versions of ourselves fit the changing landscape. My hair changed first, from deep brown to blue, then pink. She grew hers out long. Every time one of us changed something about ourselves, the other usually followed with their own version of it. It didn't feel particularly painful at the time. I just remember she wasn't around as much anymore. It was the kind of thing you don't notice until it's already over. By freshman year, my hair had grown back to its natural brown and developed loose, uneven curls. I'd pierced my own nose that summer and started a collection of small, poorly done hand-poked tattoos across my body. When I walked into my last period, she was there. She had kept her hair long, but it was box-dyed black now and visibly damaged at the ends. Her mascara was always clumsy and a little smudged, but she had put it on in a hurry and stopped caring halfway through. She wore her eyeshadow in a similar fashion, a little too heavy for her features and not quite blended all the way. Our high school was on a block schedule, so we only saw each other every other day. But within a few weeks, we had fallen back into it like nothing happened. It felt like picking up a conversation we had paused somewhere back then, like we had never really been separated in the first place. She had started smoking weed in 8th grade, and we began to take frequent bathroom breaks between classes just to meet up and disappear for a few minutes at a time. I always let her hit my Juul in exchange for her cart. We'd stand there leaning on the stalls for almost 20 minutes sometimes, talking about nothing important, then walk each other back to class as slowly as possible, like neither one of us really wanted to return. The school year blurred into itself. So did the summer after. We'd end up on her back porch at night more often than not, passing things back and forth, laughing too hard at things that weren't really funny. I remember throwing up on the weathered wood after too much of her parents' Casamigos. The charcoal taste still sharp in my throat when we slipped back inside like nothing had happened. I've avoided tequila ever since. In the morning, when her mom came in yelling about it, we tried to blame it on the dog. I know you two are lying because it smells like straight liquor out there. She stormed into the kitchen, and we couldn't hold it in anymore. We just looked at each other and lost it. After that, it became an inside joke. Anytime one of us was stretching the truth, we'd click our tongues and mutter, "It smells like liquor out there." In the fall of sophomore year, she'd started seeing a freshman. It wasn't anything serious, at least not in the way she talked about it, but she kept asking me to go to one of his JV football games with her because she was too nervous to go alone. I eventually agreed, mostly just to stop hearing about it, and told her I'd only go if we could get stoned first. She came over after school that Thursday, and we killed time at my house until it was late enough to leave. We didn't really talk about anything important, just let the hours pass between us the way they usually did. At some point, I looked over at her and said, "Hey, did you still want that tattoo?" She had asked me for one weeks earlier, after I pierced her nose in the school bathroom. Neither of us had brought it up since. "Duh," she replied. "Can you do it at the game tonight? I have to be home kind of early." I picked at my nails for a second before answering. "Yeah, what did you want again? I need to draw it out with a Sharpie first." "What about a star, like the one you have, but on my ankle?" She smiled a little. "So we can match." She always got a little too excited when we matched. Clothes, jewelry, all the usual teenage things. At the time, it felt flattering more than anything else. I remember pausing longer than I meant to. Just for a second. Then I shrugged. "Sure." By the time spring had rolled around, COVID had started shutting everything down. After lockdown, I spent most nights at her house. There wasn't much of a structure to it, just hours blurring into each other. We'd sit on her bed and watch YouTube videos we weren't really paying attention to, or lie there in the dark talking about nothing until one of us fell asleep mid-sentence. Sometimes I'd catch her answering questions for me before I could even speak, like she already knew what I was going to say. She'd started sneaking out to see that boy from the fall, using me as a cover more than once. I always hated it, but I never had the guts to fully say it out loud. By then, whatever we were had stopped having a clear shape. We started falling asleep cuddling more often than not. We were wandering down to the park one late summer night, intent on getting the last drops of wax out of an old TKO extract we had been saving. The moon hung low in the sky, a dreamy crescent like the kind you would see in an old children's cartoon. There weren't any clouds, but the air was thick and muggy from the last rain 3 nights ago. She flicked her lighter on and held it against the glass longer than she needed to. It left a black scorch mark that never really came off, smearing onto my fingers as I propped the cart straight up. She looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "You know I'm in love with you, right?" I blinked. It took me a second longer to reply than it should have. "Yeah," I paused. "Maybe sometimes I'm in love with you too." She laughed like she didn't know what to do with my answer and changed the subject. We finished what was left of the conversation, and I asked if she wanted to get stoned. She nodded. Of course she did. And when she took the first pull, she kind of held it in for a moment before grabbing my face. Her lips were soft, and the smoke tasted like metal in the way it always does when the wax is almost gone. We sat there for a little longer, and she asked if I wanted to go to the Waffle House down the road. I agreed. By the time we got there, the post-bar crowd had already passed, and there was only a single server behind the counter. I tipped her more than I needed to and told her I hoped she didn't have too much longer on her shift. I don't remember much about the food. I never really do. I remember her eyes, though, big and brown, darker than mine, always framed with smudged eyeliner and this pinkish silver glitter around the inner corners. Watching me more than anything else, watching me like she was trying to understand something by looking at it long enough. She held onto my arm the entire walk back to her house. We stole a bottle of her parents' liquor like we usually did and fell asleep buzzed. She was curled into me like we were girlfriends. It felt like we were that night. She woke me up 2 hours later at 4 in the morning to tell me she was going to see him. She would be back before 7. I knew what I wanted to ask, and I think she did too, but I was too scared. She could tell. All I said was, "Okay, call me if you need anything." She looked at me for a little longer than she needed to. Then she smiled, small and tired, before kissing my cheek. On her way out, she paused at the window. "Leave it unlocked for me," she whispered. And then she was gone. We didn't see much of each other after that night. Graduation was the last place we really spoke. We exchanged pleasantries in the crowd after the ceremony, talking about college like it was something happening to other people. How we'd made it through before and we'd make it through again. We drifted again without really making it feel like a decision. She moved about 30 minutes north of where we grew up. I moved downtown into Atlanta. It didn't feel like anything dramatic at the time, just distance doing what it always had done. I always figured we'd find our way back eventually. There were a couple times after that where we ended up together again. They were brief, almost accidental, but nothing really that lasted. We couldn't seem to find our anchor. And then there was the Chevron. Early morning, just before traffic started to pick up, where everything still felt hazy and quiet. She was in front of me now. It took me a second to unclench my jaw and reply. "Oh my God, how have you been?" I adjusted my expression, grinning now and reaching my arms out for a hug. She squeezed me too hard and laughed, tossing her head back a little. "I've been good. It's been way too long. I almost thought you didn't recognize me." I played her last remark off with a nervous laugh. "God, yeah, it's been forever. Why don't we go grab coffee at a Starbucks, if you have time, I mean." I guess I'm not too busy. Yeah, I'll meet you there." She bounced up into the air, brimming with excitement. "Yay, come on, I'll be right behind you." I forced a smile and began to get into my car as she bounded back to her own. Sighing, I tossed the Red Bull into my glove box and pulled out of the lot. We pulled into the Starbucks a couple streets down from the Chevron and parked separately. I watched her get out of her car, pretending I was a few seconds behind. Inside, it was early enough for the place to feel too empty and too clean. We ordered without much discussion. She ordered something complex I vaguely remembered as my go-to back in high school. I stuck to a plain iced latte. I didn't really want coffee anyways. We sat down by the window and she started talking first, mostly about college. Then the usual questions you ask when you're trying to rebuild something you've left untouched for a long time. I answered her with a tone slightly brighter than it had been in the parking lot, and she nodded along in a way that felt familiar enough to be disorienting. At one point, she interjected, not rudely, just surprisingly naturally. It felt like the way we used to be back in high school, talking over each other and laughing it off. I noticed, but I let it go. I kind of missed it. We talked about boyfriends after that. It hadn't felt like a loaded topic at first, just one of those things we're supposed to update each other on. I told her I'd broken up with mine not long after graduation and made a half-hearted joke about how I should have always stayed away from blonde men. Something about how their hair never darkens because they're still immature at heart. She said she had split it off with her ex around that time too, but she was seeing someone new now. They'd been together for a while. I made a comment about not really dating anybody seriously since then. I called myself a free spirit in the way people do when they're trying to make something sound lighter than it is. She showed me a photo of him, her new boyfriend. I guess he was technically kind of old, but new to me. He was tall and blonde, familiar in a way I didn't want to think too hard about. She mentioned his parents were Slavic too, from Ukraine to be specific, and laughed a little like it was funny how these things worked out. I just smiled in response, because that's what you're supposed to do in those moments. As she launched into a bit of a rambling monologue, I noticed her jewelry. She used to always wear gold. I only wear silver. I always have, but that had never mattered before. Her necklace was silver and her earrings were too. I told myself not to read into it. The conversation was beginning to drift. She was still talking the same way she used to, but something about it felt slightly off. Her tone had flattened in places where it used to stay animated, like she was matching something without meaning to. I wasn't sure what I was hearing anymore. We stayed there for a while talking about high school. It had been about half an hour, maybe more. The world outside was fully awake now. She brought up the time I pierced her nose in the school bathrooms. I can't believe I let you do that. It's a miracle it even healed at all, and the infection lasted like a whole month. You felt so bad. What? I don't remember it ever getting infected. I furrowed my brow slightly. I think you were just so scared it would be, you almost convinced yourself it was. Maybe I was wrong. She laughed. Oh my God, I can't believe you forgot about that. It looked like a humongous pimple, and my mom called me Rudolph until it healed. Huh, I guess you're right. I held my tongue as she brought up a couple more memories, each ever so slightly off. Not necessarily wrong, just different. Like she had lived some alternate reality. I didn't bother correcting her again. She mentioned something about us being attached at the hip back then. I checked my phone more than once after that, started thinking about leaving, but didn't say anything out loud. Then she asked why I was back in town. I told her it was just an early Mother's Day visit. I didn't ask her what she was here for. I didn't really want to know. She nodded like it made perfect sense, like she'd been almost sure of my answer before asking. The conversation kept going, but something had shifted. She was bringing up little things about my life now, things I hadn't told her. Not in a way that felt impossible, but just personal enough to make me feel unsure about where she could have learned them. So, things are good with you and your mom right now? She asked, tilting her head. Yeah, it's been pretty good. We haven't had a big argument since around graduation. Huh, I thought you missed your period that month though. I blinked, a little dumbfounded. I didn't recall telling anyone about that. What? What does that have to do with anything? Oh, sorry, I thought you guys usually only argue right before your period starts. You would get all worked up about every little thing and all. She sounded a little apologetic now, though her expression looked more like a deer caught in headlights. I guess that was probably a factor or something, yeah. I let the awkward moment wash over us for a second. She didn't. She launched right back into some tired speech about how her and her mom had been the same. They still couldn't reconcile, blah, blah, blah. I could feel my patience thinning, like I was watching her instead of talking to her. That was when I started noticing the smaller things. The way her tone flattened in the same places mine does when I stopped trying to sound interested. Or how she was holding pauses. I told myself I was imagining it. There's this little divot on the inside of my right nostril, on the part of the skin that covers the septum. When I was a kid, I had an angioma right there, and everyone would always ask if my nose was bleeding. My mom got sick of calls home and my complaints, so when I was in 4th grade, she had it removed. It's not noticeable now unless I point it out, the kind of thing I think about in passing here and there. She was still talking when I looked at her more carefully. It was there, the same small dip in the same spot. For a second, I didn't respond at all. My stomach twisted. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping a little too loudly against the floor. I didn't say anything, and neither did she. I walked out fast, leaving my almost untouched coffee behind on the table. I didn't look back for long, but when I did, I could still see her sitting there by the window, eyes wide and trained on me, still smiling like the conversation hadn't ended. I got in my car and drove. My phone buzzed while I was merging onto the highway. Her name popped up on CarPlay. A wave of nausea crashed over me, and I barely managed to pull onto the shoulder before full-on heaving my guts out onto the pavement. Just pure bile, nothing left. I don't really remember getting back to my apartment. I just know I was weaving through heavy morning traffic like I was on autopilot. When I finally got inside, I checked every lock twice. Front door, deadbolt, chain, balcony, windows. I knew I had to open the text. My fingers trembled as I unlocked my phone. The preview popped up. Just one word. Gotcha. I didn't go anywhere after that. I called out of work for the next day, and the day after that. I told my manager I was coming down with some sort of stomach flu. I told my roommate Kyla the same thing. She's been picking up groceries for the week. I didn't leave the house again until Saturday morning. I avoided all my usual spots, just straight to work and back. Work was slow and uneventful. It almost made it worse. Part of me almost wanted her to come in, just so I'd know where she was. The utter absence of customers made my skin crawl. I couldn't bring myself to tell any of my coworkers why I was so off. I got home that afternoon and realized I'd run out of cigarettes. I texted my roommate and asked her to pick up some more while she was out. She replied within a couple of minutes. "Yeah, no prob, but what's up with your number?" I paused. What? My number? What the hell was that supposed to mean? That sick feeling began to rise up into my chest. Before I could respond, she sent another message. "You texted me this morning from a new one, LOL." I didn't respond after that. Kyla came back with a fresh pack within the hour, and I tried to explain it all to her, stumbling over my words. "I don't really care if this sounds crazy. You just need to block that number. That wasn't me." She blinked at me in disbelief. Okay, yeah, I'll block it. You should probably get some rest. This whole thing sounds a little outlandish." I stopped arguing and kinda just stood there for a minute. There was no point. Around 11 p.m. last night, my mom called. "Hey, sweetie, why does your location show you're at your apartment when I'm looking at you standing outside the door?" What? Someone just knocked, said they forgot their keys and needed to come in. They sound exactly like you. "Mom," I started, "that's not me. Don't open the door. Call the police." My mom went quiet for a second. Then, very softly, she spoke again. "She keeps pulling at her sleeves like you do." I heard another knock through the phone. 3 quiet taps against the front door. Then my own voice, muffled but mine. "Mom, please, you know it's me." In life, there's really only one thing that's permanent, and that's your identity. And this story threatens that. The horror of it isn't just that someone looks like the narrator, it's that they remember like her, they copy her habits, and slowly replace her piece by piece. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe. Go on over to the main channel, drovenmc, as I post on there every other day as well. Every day that I'm not posting on here, I'm posting on there. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.